My wife and I went to watch the planning board the other evening, and my wife is like, the audio is broken on this. And it was because of that dead silence before the start of the meeting. She's like, nobody's talking. They're talking. I can't hear them. So he had to scroll through. And that dead silence before we start this meeting reminded me of the same thing. Somebody tuning in is going to be like, is my audio broken? I look forward to seeing everyone in person again someday. I do have 6:30. I think the only member we are missing is Rick Dupere at this moment.
And I think I'm communicating with Rick. I have sort of a cryptic email from a phone number. So I'm going to be sending him the link, and he may well be joining us. So we'll see how we do.
Okay. Are you flag ready over there, Jay? You're on mute still. All right. All right. It is 6:30. It is Monday, August 24th, 2020. This is the Town of Scarborough Planning Board meeting. I will call this meeting to order. And the first order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. If you could all rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the
United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all. Next, we'll do the roll call. Robin Saunders.
Here.
Roger Beely.
Here.
Rachel Hendrickson.
Here.
Rick Meinking.
Here.
Jennifer Ladd.
Here.
Richard Dupere. Nicholas McGee. All right. So we have a full voting board this evening. Rick will act as first alternate. Rick Meinking will act as first alternate in case of any loss of board members during the meeting. I'm going to make a quick announcement. This is a Zoom meeting. If you would like to watch the Zoom meeting, you can go to the planning board's webpage, and to watch only, click the YouTube link. To attend the planning board meeting virtually and provide public comment at the meeting, click on the Zoom link. The board recommends written public comment prior to an upcoming meeting at this time, given the remote video nature conference format. Directions can be found on the planning board's webpage. Attendees are muted and must raise their hand to be called on during public comment parts of the agenda. Please only raise your hand once it's time for public comment and not during the applicant's presentation, board deliberation, etc. Chair happens to drop off the meeting due to technical difficulties. The vice chair still start running the meeting until the chair can return. That is the quick announcements for the evening. Next item of business is the approval of minutes for July 13th and August 3rd. We are going to have to table those. They are not quite ready yet. So first order of business this evening is Nicholas and Peter Truman request an advisory opinion for a miscellaneous appeal for conversion of a legal non-conforming use, Assessor's Map U22 Lot 108. Jamel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this project is located in the R4A zoning district along King Street in the Pine Point neighborhood. So the applicants applied for a miscellaneous appeal to the Zoning Board of Appeals for a conversion of a legal non-conforming use. So in accordance with the zoning ordinance, before making a decision on any miscellaneous appeal, the zoning board shall refer to the planning board for an advisory opinion. The advisory opinion should be based on the non-conformance standards found in the zoning ordinance. So the applicant's proposing to convert the existing 9-unit hotel motel use to privately owned dwellings within a multifamily building. Staff would like to note that the existing use does allow for the units to be rented year-round, but not to the same tenant for all 12 months. No other modifications are proposed on the property. So staff did review the materials and provided several comments for the board's consideration related to existing and future vehicular traffic and compatibility within the neighborhood. And again, staff did receive several letters from the public and has distributed them to the board leading up to tonight's meeting. Turn it back to you.
Thank you, Jamel.
Nick, if I may real quick, I believe Rick Dupere is in our attendees list on his phone. So I believe I have his number correct, and so I'm pretty sure this is him. So I'm going to bring him in to talk. If we could just confirm that's who this is before we venture too much further. So Rick Duperry, if this is you, your phone would appear to be on mute.
Hey Jay, I'm on. Sorry. Technical difficulties.
Hi, Rick.
Hey Nick, how are you?
Good. Welcome. All right.
Sorry
So,
for the tardiness.
oh, no worries. So we are going to have Nicholas or Peter Truman present their application, please. And just a quick announcement before we jump too far into it. We do have a packed agenda this evening, so if we could try to keep to the main points, either listed in staff comments, and also as you go through your presentation, also try to summarize as best you can what we're looking at, and for those at home, without getting into an extraordinary amount of detail, anything that we feel needs to be explored further. I'm sure the board will have questions that we can probably address some of those remaining items through the questioning process. With that, Peter or Nicholas Truman? You're both on mute if you're trying to talk to us.
Hello,
Hi, Nicholas?
hello.
Yes, hello,
Yes.
can you hear us?
We can. I can. I wonder if my brother is and our attorney, Gene Libby. He's supposed to be on the meeting also.
We have,
I do see that an Elizabeth Briggerman is raising her hand. Is she part of your team, Nicholas and Peter?
I got my hand up. I can't see myself, but can you see me?
no, we cannot.
Okay. The host asked for you to start video. Okay. There we go. Zoom would like to. Okay.
We can see you.
Hey, look at that. Wow. Cool. Woo. Hi, everybody. Good evening. Thank you for taking your time and consideration for us this evening.
All right, so do
You
you
have
have,
to ask me questions.
yeah,
sure.
so you want to go through just
I'm
a
not
brief
sure what-
overview? Yeah, do a brief overview of what it is that you'd like us to know, kind of quick summarization of where you are and where you want to be.
What we've done to the property in the past and what we're trying to do now. Is that what you're asking me?
Yeah, just kind of go over what it is you're attempting to do here.
We're attempting to discontinue the Lighthouse Motor Inn, the Lighthouse Suites at Pine Point. It's been in existence for 62 years. We're dissolving the business and taking the 9 newly renovated units that were done 4 years ago that people have been living in year round for the last 4 years. We have one new owner in the building that's been there for 2 years, and we're trying to make them fully just residential units.
Okay. All right, is that pretty much it for presentation wise?
Well, I guess questions would be, yes, I guess that's the presentation. We're trying to dissolve the existing motel usage.
Okay, that's
And
fine.
conforming
So
to
what-
the- conforming to the residential nature of the neighborhood.
Okay, so what we'll do now is, just so you know, the way the process works is that was kind of your applicant introduction. We'll move on to public comment, and then after public comment, the board will ask you some questions, have you a chance to address anything that we feel needs to be talked about a little bit more. As far as the process between the public and the applicant, we ask that there's no direct back and forth, that all questions should go through the chair, or comments be addressed in that manner. So
Mr.
with that
Chair,
said-
Mr. Chair, can you hear me? My name is Gene Libby. I'm an attorney representing the Lighthouse, and I was to do the presentation. But
okay,
when my secretary registered me, it showed up under her name, Elizabeth Briggerman, as opposed to my name. Gene Libby.
Okay. Well, Mr. Libby, do you have anything to add to Mr. Truman's presentation?
I do, if the board would permit me.
Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you. Do we have a shared screen, Jamel?
Yes, you can share your screen if you're ready.
The Lighthouse was before the planning board back in 2012. At that time, the Lighthouse was proposing to create 8 condominium units out of the 22 hotel units. They were also planning to add a 3rd story to the building. The planning board issued an approval of that proposal, which I've marked as Exhibit E to the application to the planning board. Are you able to share that, Jamel?
Are you asking me to share for you?
Yes, please.
Okay, give me a second. Yep, I'll share your application. What page on your full application is it?
It's Exhibit E to the application. While Jamel is locating that, the approval issued by the planning board was not completed due to financial problems. In 2015, the Lighthouse did a conversion of 22 units to 9 condominium units, although it retained the condo motel style of doing business. The occupancy permit was issued on March 7th, 2016, approving the 9 units to be operated, but they were limited to being operated under the original condo documents to only being occupied 185 days out of every 365 days. The occupancy permit was granted. That is Exhibit C to the application. You had any luck finding the planning board approval? Yes, this is the planning board approval. Thank you. Issued by the planning board back on July 20th, 2012. Note that was 8 units and 3 stories. The current structure has not been modified. It is still 2 stories, and there are 9 units. 8 of the units are still owned by the declarant, the Truman brothers, and 1 unit is owned privately. The issues that the staff asked us to address was parking. There are no changes to the parking. There are 22 spaces. There are 2 allocated per unit. There are 8 units allocated 2 spaces. The penthouse is allocated 3 spaces, and there are 3 guest spaces, one of which is handicapped. When the original application was approved by the planning board asked us to set the gate because parking will be accessed by a member-only electronic pass. They asked us to set the gate 20 feet from the property line, which we did. The gate is 20 feet from the property line. Because the number of units was more than cut in half, the use for the property will be substantially less. The condominium documents will be modified to provide a 3-month minimum rental period. The current minimum rental period is 7 days. So this will complete the conversion to primary residences. The question of compatibility to the neighborhood, there are probably 4 other condominiums in the immediate area which have the residential condominium style. So there's going to be no change in that. Whether or not it'll be compatible with the neighborhood, the building has been there since the 50s. And the usage, as indicated, will be cut in half. The special exception requires that noise and hours of operation will not negatively impact the neighborhood. The present structure has been operating since 2016 with no, to my knowledge, noise complaint. And of course, there'll be no hours of operation because the hotel office will be eliminated and all of the units will be sold to private owners, and any rental of those private units will be handled the same way a residence is handled. When the conversion took place in 2015, the Trumans installed a state-of-the-art life safety system, which is electronically connected to engine 4. The planning board asked us at the time to designate the spaces in front of the former motel as a fire lane, which has been done. All of the life code safety installations in 2015 and approved in 2016 are state-of-the-art and comply with any and all residential requirements. Of course, the Trumans would be happy to have the fire department look at the property again, but that process has been reviewed and completed. So we think this is a simple matter where a grandfathered non-conforming use is going to be reduced to substantially to 9 units. Those 9 units will be private residences. They will no longer be operated as motel hotels. And of course, motel hotels are taking quite a hit in this era of coronavirus, where people are traveling much less and renting properties much less. So I appreciate allowing me the opportunity to speak. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
All right, thank you very much. We do have an opportunity for public comment on this item. If you are here in attendance and would like to speak on this, we ask that you use the raise my hand feature in the bottom, should be the lower right-hand corner of your screen. We'll give it a minute here while you search for that. We ask that anyone speaking tonight from the public try to limit their comments to 3 minutes, just because we do have a very full schedule this evening. All right, I do not see any members of the public with a hand raised, so I will turn this over to the board. Rachel, would you like to go first?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the presentation. It actually answered a couple of questions, so I'm not going to ask them. I do have, I'm still a little confused about the length of time of residencies. If these what are now condos are sold for private residents, would they be occupied or could they be occupied year round? And if by the owners, and if they were used for rentals, I believe you said 3 months is the least, is the shortest period of the rental. Can they be rented year round?
Would you like me to respond?
I would appreciate the answer. Yes, thank you.
In 2019, the town began taxing the property as residential condominiums. So they they are taxing the property the same as they would tax any private homeowner. So the answer to your question is yes, the property could be occupied full-time by the owner, or the owner could elect to lease the property to a tenant full-time. The minimum rental period of 3 months is to ensure that there's no transient traffic of weekly or less.
All right, thank you. And with the closure of the office, I assume then any rental arrangements are the responsibility of individual owners,
Yes.
not of any other organization.
Correct,
Okay, and that's why the office is no longer needed.
correct.
Are you intending to do anything with that office in terms of renovating or just leaving it there or occupying it or whatever?
I know of no plans at this time to renovate the office. Nick, could you speak to that, if any?
Yeah, I can speak to that. It's going to just stay as management quarters, as used by the association as a common area, whatever the association decides to do as far as that goes with the building. It's going to be, it's obviously it's owned by the association. The 9 owners will control that. It's just part of the property right now. It's
Thank you. Actually, I have no more questions.
association.
I appreciate I appreciate the information you've given us. Thank you.
Thanks, Rachel.
You're welcome.
Yeah, go ahead.
Could I just ask for a point of clarification? I heard Mr. Libby talked about his understanding that under current and maybe let me that the current owners could live in it, stay in a unit year round. My understanding is based on the town's prior approvals of the site and the declarations that no one tenant can stay in a unit for more than half a year. Now, the units could be occupied for a full year, but my understanding is that no one tenant can stay in there for more than half a year, and it can't be their primary residence. So I just maybe ask for a point of clarification, maybe if I could.
Sure, let me respond. The transition from a classification as a condo motel to a residential condominium is intended to facilitate the occupancy of full-time occupancy through the year. I didn't say that the units can now be occupied for a year. If the occupancy permit, which I submitted, could be displayed to the board members, the occupancy permit carries a specific prohibition of occupying the units for more than 185 days out of 365 days. With the transition from commercial to residential, those limitations would no longer apply. The limitations that would apply would be the amendment to the condominium documents, providing that new owners could not rent the property for less than 3 months.
Okay, thank you. Yep, I misheard what you had previously said.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I have a follow-up question on that. So I see that you had the first, declaration listed in your packet, which, prohibited people from living there year round, claiming it as a primary residency, even voting. And there's the second amendment, which is to the declaration. And so my question would be, and it removes those, because basically what we're talking about here is just turning the whole entire building into a condominium complex, which is extremely common form of residential living these days. So with that change, though, I would say that my one concern is usually when you do these amendments, is this completely declarant controlled at this point? Because at some point I would think you would have to have a vote by the ownership there and as to whether or not to accept those changes? And how would we have any type of accountability of the acceptance of those changes?
Mr. Chair, the condominium association is controlled by the declarants because they still own 8 of the 9 units.
So they can pass that Second Amendment based by virtue of just having a declarant control. Okay,
Yes,
thank you for clarifying that.
you're welcome.
All right, any other members with questions? Robin?
So have you consulted with the fire department on what modifications need to be made in order for you to comply with section 4I.4 in the special exceptions?
We did in the process of the conversion when we installed all of the life safety systems, which the fire department inspected and improved. What I was trying to say is that because these systems were implemented in 2016, they are all state of the art and they're all designed for residential living. What I suggested was we're happy to have the fire department over there for another inspection, but that occurred during the occupancy process in 2016.
And at that time, though, was the occupancy, was it expressed to the fire department what the occupancy was intended to be, including having residents being there up to 6 months a year, and it can't be their primary residence?
Well, I don't know what the fire department knew at the time.
No, I'm asking what was expressed to the fire department in 2016. Is it the same as what's happening now in 2020?
Yes, when the fire department went through the building, as well as code enforcement, they commented that these systems qualify for any these comply with any residential structure in town.
Okay, and so how does the applicant then sort of reconcile the compatibility with the existing neighborhood? Can you comment on that at all? It was in the staff comments.
Sure. I think in 3 primary ways. Number one, the intensity of the use has decreased from 22 transient hotel units to 9 residential private ownership units. There'll no longer be a office offering rentals of the property. And second, the special exception under the ordinance speaks of noise and hours of operation. There has never been a noise complaint, to my knowledge, because that's simply not the clientele who's been using the property. Private owners obviously will be like any other residential owners, and there'll be no hours of operation because the commercial establishment will completely close. So that it will be similar. There's the Atlantic condominiums, which are just down the street on the beachfront. There's the Moorings, which converted to a condominium cottage style arrangement. So it is very consistent and compatible with what's in the area.
And can you please discuss existing and future vehicular traffic and pedestrian circulation? Do you feel like you've completely addressed that in your presentation?
I think we have, because the parking lot is a controlled access. To get into the parking lot, you need an electronic card to open the gate. And since the gate has been installed, the traffic is going to be reduced because the commercial aspect is going away. The only pedestrian traffic, all of the parking is on the western side of the lot. There's no parking in front of the motel building. There is an access way to the beach from the property. It's the same access way which the Trumans sold to the town and deeded a right of way to the town, to the beach. And of course, the public uses the public walkway, which is adjacent to the parking lot and between the private residential development on the other side. So there'll be no change in parking patterns. There'll be no change in pedestrian patterns. The area down there now is pretty well demonstrated through crosswalks and existing use the last 4 years. I would defer to.
Sorry. So are we to assume then that before anyone occupies this year round, other than the owners, that you all would come before the ZBA or the planning board to modify this accordingly?
The planning board, as I understand it, and I'll defer to staff, issues an advisory opinion. The Trumans then have to go before the Zoning Board of Appeals, and they have to satisfy the standards for special exceptions, which are in section 4H. And there are, I think, 9 special exceptions. One of those for compatibility is there, Ms. Saunders. So they have to meet that hurdle before the Zoning Board of Appeals as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Any other members from the planning board? Roger.
Yeah, just clarification, if I may. One of the units is treated as a condo. It's under individual ownership. You mentioned you want to sell this as individual ownerships. Couldn't you sell it as the eight units to one owner, one entity? Isn't that a possibility?
I suppose it's possible.
Okay. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to equate what you're doing there with what I'm familiar with, my experience. And for instance, like the homeowners association or the condo owners association, they basically can change the guidelines whenever they want to with the appropriate vote. Isn't that correct? Or do they go through some, like to the town or something like that to make some changes?
Well, the condominium is still in the period of declarant control. Once the units are sold, the declarant would then transition the management of the condominium to the owners. And the owners would then, the only way they could change the limitations would be, one, by amending the declaration, which requires a supermajority, and 2, seeking the town's blessing, because they cannot go back to the commercial style of operation, because once that is eliminated, the ordinance prohibits a resumption of that non-conforming use. So once these are conveyed privately, they would be owned privately and subject to the limitations in the declaration as any other condominium unit is. And there are internal policies for changing those, which require a supermajority of owners of the condominium.
Right. What I'm getting at is, for instance, like the 3-month minimum. Once that the current declarant turns over control to the association, and with a supermajority, couldn't they change that guideline without? Would they have to go through the get confirmation from the town? Maybe somebody. Maybe
From the town's perspective, Roger, I'm just going to mute you because I think there's feedback coming through your microphone there. From the town's perspective, what the applicant is requesting is for these to be able to be owner-occupied, year-round units. Like any other owner-occupied, year-round unit, you could rent that out. You could rent, any board member here could rent out their house. So I would say, you know, that 3-month thing, that's wholly a private, that's part of the association. Those are private covenants, not something that the town would get involved in. The pure question before the town is the conversion of the condotel to year-round residents consistent with the standards, which I think it was Robin Saunders was sort of walking us through. So I think that's really the question that the board, this board, is to provide their advisory opinion to the Board of Appeals on. I hope that helps.
Okay, yes, it does. I guess my last question is, and maybe staff could help me out on this as well. Mr. Libby mentioned other properties down in the Pine Point area that have converted to these condos. Are the guidelines being set up by the Trumans similar to what already exists, or are we asking them for something that's, are we asking them to do something that's contrary to what we're accepting for everybody else, I guess is what I'm saying.
So again, I'll just mention that the 3-month item piece isn't something that the town is requiring. So I'm not actually, in my time here, I don't recall. I think these conversions happened prior to my time with the community. So I haven't looked at other covenants, but again, those are private deed restrictions, and those are private issues that the town wouldn't get involved with. Again, the sort of straight question is the conversion of the condotel, which does limit the occupancy to a, the homeowner occupancy, if you will, year round currently, is the board, what's the Board of Appeals is to decide if that use would meet the conversion of one non-conforming use to another non-conforming use standards.
Okay. The reason I was asking these is just to find out the level of activity that might be occurring. For instance, right now, those 8 other units, are they rented as just regular motel units and like for a week at a time, or are they long-term rentals?
They're currently, they're both, sir.
Okay, so basically, if you convert them to ownership, you essentially are going to be stabilizing to some degree the level of vehicle activity, I would think.
I would agree with that.
All right, I'll leave it at that for the time being. Thank you.
Thanks, Roger.
Thank you.
Any other board members with questions for the applicant? No? Okay, so we need to provide just an advisory opinion. All right, I'll just start by roll call, I guess. Rachel.
I find that it meets the guidelines.
Roger Beely.
I would agree.
Robin Saunders.
Agreed.
Jennifer Ladd.
I agree.
Nick McGee. I agree. All right. Next step for you as an applicant is the zoning board. Thank you very much for your submission and wish you luck.
Thank you for your time. Appreciate
Thanks
it.
for your time. Thank you. Thank you.
All right. The next item on our agenda this evening is Ballantine Development LLC requests a subdivision amendment for Eastern Village Assessors Map R73, lots 21A and 21B. Jamel?
Mr. Chair, I'll just recuse myself if you don't mind, so I'll go black.
Thank you. Rick Meinking, that is going to, Rick Duperi, who is on the phone, will be elevated to a voting member for this item.
Okay.
Ready for me?
I am ready for you, Jamel.
All right. So this proposed amendment includes the creation of a 44 foot wide private way to serve the approved lot 140 in the Eastern Village subdivision. Staff would like to note that this was before the board back in March. So this is the second time before you. And the lot was created as part of the 14th amended plan and essentially requires a private way for addressing purposes. And that's really what we're reviewing tonight. Staff did receive some letters from the public and did distribute to the board accordingly. And staff has provided the board with a draft motion with conditions for your consideration this evening. Turn it back to you.
Thanks, Jamel. Who do we have this evening? Carrie, go ahead.
Good evening. Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so yes, thank you for hearing me tonight. This was originally before the board for subdivision amendment in September of 2019, at which point it was approved, which became the 14th Amendment. We recorded the plan, we came in to pull a building permit, and we had an address issue since 1 and 2 Inspiration Drive, 1 and 2 Classical had both been used. So we had one of two choices. We could either renumber the lots or we could come in and seek another amendment. So we met with town planner, public works, and public safety at the town hall and hammered out what would be acceptable to all parties. And that's what you see before you tonight. So we're just requesting approval on this, which would put in place a private way that we would maintain for accessing lot 140, and it would have its address off of that private way, which would be White Hart Lane. And it's pretty straightforward, Mr. Chairman. I don't have really much more to add than that.
Thanks, Gary. We do have an opportunity for public comment. If there's any members of the public here that would like to speak on this item, please use the raise my hand feature located in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. We'll wait a minute just to make finds that okay before turning it over to the board. Seeing none, I will turn this over to the board. Is there any questions out of the board on this one? Rachel.
Yeah, I don't have a question so much as I guess a comment, having looked at some of the messages that came from the other folks in Eastern Village. Condition 1C in the proposed draft motion actually, to my way of thinking, provides folks with a certainty that this will be the only building on that off of that private road, and if that was going to change, that it would come before the planning board. So with that condition, I think this motion meets the needs and allows the process to continue.
Thanks, Rachel. Any other board members? Roger.
Yes, just a clarification. If in the future, the Eastern Village Association, when it become, under the control of the ownership, if they decide that for some reason they want to expand Classical Way up to Ward Street, would this inhibit that at all? Or,
Well, that they would not be able to do that. That would be something that only I would have the right to do, but it would not inhibit it, no. It would just go from a private way to becoming a public way.
okay, why would you only, if they have control of the association, why would you have control over whether that happens or not?
Well,
Carrie,
if they have control of the association, I own the land.
okay, okay.
I think any future expansion of it would require planning board review and approval. So
Right, I
we
understand
would
that.
deal with right title and interest at that time, depending on who owns North Village, who owns, whether the Eastern Village Homeowner Association has been turned over or not. Those would all be issues that would be dealt with at a future application.
I understand that, Jay. I just wanted to make sure that this would not inhibit that option should that ever come up in the future. That's all. I'm all set.
Thanks, Roger. Any other board members? All right. Oh, Jen, go ahead.
Expanding on that a little bit, and maybe this is for another time because if it doesn't happen, then it's kind of a non-issue, but I'm just curious if we're then creating another addressing issue down the road, if that were to be extended as a private way or converted at some point to a public way, would it then be, it wouldn't be extended as Classical Way, correct? It would be the new White Hart Lane.
Jay, do you want me to answer that or do you want to answer it?
I guess my answer would be, that would be, our addressing agent has looked at this and he's comfortable with the proposal as is. And should it come back forward and connect from Classical up to Ward Street, I think we would take a look at that again, but White Hart Lane has been a name that's been approved as part of this overall subdivision for some time.
The only other thing I would add, Jennifer, would be that when we discussed this, we figured that Ward Street would continue all the way down to Classical. So White Hart would go away and it would then be Ward Street.
Okay, that makes more sense to me. I was trying to picture what it would look like to have, essentially to have 3 streets.
Yeah,
3
there'd be the same problem.
Yeah,
Right.
okay. All right, that's fine. I lived in a house once where we just got a letter in the mail and was like, hey, the town changed your address. It actually worked out. It was better for us anyway. So that was my first question. Second question is just a confirmation based on this plan. It looks like the, as shown anyway, the proposed layout for any trail connection does not fall within White Hart Lane. Is that right? And is that intentional?
That's correct. The public access easement that we'll be executing will not be interrupted by the private way in any way. It'll still be all, it'll still occur.
Okay, thanks. Those are the only questions I have.
Thanks, Jennifer. Any other comments from the planning board or questions? Okay, Jamel, you got a motion for us? All right. I move to approve the project titled 15th Amended Subdivision Plan North proposed by Ballantine Development LLC as depicted on the plan set prepared by Goral Palmer dated 7/13/20 with the following findings and conditions. Findings: the proposed 15th Amended Subdivision Plan includes the creation of a 44-foot wide private right-of-way to serve Lot 140. This lot was created as part of the approved 14th Amended Subdivision Plan and has frontage along Inspiration Drive. The applicant is seeking the private drive for addressing purposes. Conditions: 1, prior to the release of the signed final subdivision plan, the applicant shall A, add all relevant setbacks within the existing lots on the subdivision plan. B, provide an updated full plan set for the overall Eastern Village subdivision. C, add a plan note indicating that any expansion of the access along the private drive beyond lot 40 will require an amendment. This shall be reviewed and approved by the planning department. 2, prior to the release of the signed final plan for recording, the applicant shall provide revised documentation identifying lot 140 as part of the Eastern Village Declarations / Association. This shall be reviewed and approved by the planning department. 3, all applicable prior planning board conditions of approval for the overall amended subdivision plans of Eastern Village will remain in effect. Motion.
Second.
I have a second. Have any discussion? All right, I will roll call out. Rachel Hendrickson,
Yes.
Roger Beely,
Yes.
Jennifer Ladd,
Yes.
Rick Duperi,
Yes.
Nick McGee. Yes. All right, I show that as unanimous. Good luck, Carrie. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good night.
Item on our agenda this evening is Mint Salon Block LLC requests a site plan review for 800 Technology Way, Assessor's Map U39, Lot 4727. Jamel.
Okay, so this project's located along Technology Way, as you may recall, in the Hygges Parkway zoning district. The applicant's proposing to construct an 8,200 square foot building that will consist of multiple private personal spaces along with parking and stormwater elements. During the last review with the board in June, the board requested the applicant provide alternative design concepts illustrating a design with an entrance facing Technology Way. The applicant did provide several concepts in the materials and should be sure to discuss these with the board tonight. And staff has drafted a motion if the board is comfortable with the proposed design as discussed. Turn it back to you.
Thank you, Jamel. Jason, are you presenting this evening?
I
think I'll start up.
Actually, Ann's going to start up. I was just going to tell you that. Yeah.
All right, Ann. Thanks, Ann. And just kind of go over what some of the options were with us, and then maybe the higher points of the staff notes. That would be great.
Yeah. So can I share my screen? hits. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So Mint, just quickly, Mint, the site is back here behind Katahdin Analytical Services, off of Technology Way. The adjacent buildings are situated at the, right at their property lines or the setback lines at the street. Our original proposal to you in the workshop had placed the building on the south side of the site with this L-shaped orientation. The comments at that time were that this driveway seemed too close to Passageway, which is across the street. And there was a discussion around having the entry facing the street. So after we had left that meeting, we tried several different scenarios. Two were looking at the back of the site, and it's sort of rotated 90 degrees because so where these red arrows are, where in the middle was our entry and the side was our service entry. And sort of turning that 90 degrees, we lost a lot of parking spaces. And even though we did like this one quite a lot, when we looked at it, option 2, right in this back corner, we are dropping off, I think about 7 feet. So when we were looking at foundation design along the back edge, it was almost about 15 feet tall and was really getting cost prohibitive. And we're really getting close to the sort of, I guess, the back setback line for the stream, which had us concerned about, whatever water coming off the roof would, how to manage that. These were other options that really weren't of much interest to us because of how they placed. You could sort of see the entrance from the street, but it really pushed the parking to the back and made it for sort of long walks for people to get to the front door, and put our service entrance also sort of on the front of the building as you'd be entering. So these are sort of 2 looks in that. And this one just, again, just sort of made people really walk all the way around. I sort of also looked at being somewhere in the middle of the site, but with the parking, we couldn't get a double loaded corridor. We really lost out on the number of parking spaces. So that's how we ended up at with this site position, because we really wanted to maintain the street edge. We thought that was important as far as design, and then hiding our parking in the back, planting along the front of the building. So this site plan was our colored, so you can see how the back of the site is still wooded, the adjacent site is wooded, and there is a fair amount of area between Katahdin and us that will remain wooded. And we additional parking or plantings we have in our parking lot. So just to show our rendering again, we're looking at planting along this whole front edge around the building. What this doesn't show is there is a deep drainage ditch that you can sort of see it up at the Katahdin portion. We didn't render it that way, but that we are planting all the way to the top of that banking, and then it drops down for into that drainage way. And so I think and these are just sort of more site, you can sort of see that drainage way. Our building would be similar to this, probably with much more colorful plantings. And I'll just end with our little video. I think Jason probably can talk to the other items that are on the list from this point. If anyone like to have any questions, I guess I can leave this open.
Thanks, Ann. Jason, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Still muted.
Jason, you're muted if you didn't know that. There we go.
Yep. Yeah, I just smacked myself in the head about that. Yeah.
It had the video on.
There are a couple of waivers, and Jamel, I can't remember if those were voted on yet. We do need the waiver for the reduction in drive aisle size, with the note that 25-foot drive aisles should be plenty big enough for predominantly passenger vehicles that would be coming through here. Anything bigger would be coming in and off hours. And then also we got that one, I think it's 13 parking spaces off a dead end, a parking aisle that doesn't loop. And that really, I'm already getting, Gene's already on me about losing a parking space for the new transformer location, which we moved out back. So those would be two waivers, I think, that we're asking you to consider. And then the rest, I think there was a comment on, we're using sort of a more decorative yet hardy sort of fence with the naval chain and those things. We can put that detail on the plans and the construction set if you choose to proceed with a vote tonight. And I think that was it. And then get I believe we're on the sewer district is going to vote on this soon to accept the application or the design as is. I think the site's kind of cleaned up. I don't think there's really much work left there. So.
Thanks, Jason. Just so you know, in the draft motion, the waiver you requested is on there. So I'll turn this over. Oh, I'm sorry. We have an opportunity for public comment on this item. If you are here in attendance and would like to speak on this, ask to use the raise my hand feature. All right, seeing none, I'm going to turn this over to the board. Board member questions and comments. And just an administrative note real quick. You have Robin Saunders returning as a voting member on this item. Rick Duperi, you will be back to the first alternate. Rachel.
Yeah, this is one of those applications that frustrates me tremendously because the building design is classy. I mean, that's what I would have to call it. It is a beautiful design. The landscaping works. I like the concept of the entrepreneurship that is involved. I think I think the business will be an asset to the town. And when it was cited, you didn't flip the building 180 degrees. You flipped it 90, you flipped it a different 90, you flipped it back. And at this point, it's difficult to say, it would be very difficult for me to say no to this application because you have demonstrated an interest in working with us. You have demonstrated an understanding of what our concerns are. You've been very responsive. But had the building been oriented from the beginning, we wouldn't have taken this long to talk about it, to get to this point. There is a way to orient the building so that the door is facing the road. Now, your comment about the service entrance is well taken. That's not something I had thought about, although it looks like there's the service entrance is backed up. Okay.
It's right here.
So yeah, so that could have been moved. I don't want to stop this. I don't want to kick up a fuss, although I appear to be doing that, because I really like this. I really like this idea and what you're doing here. But it was possible at the beginning to meet the standards, to meet the design standards. Had you looked at them, understood the importance to the board of that front-facing door, or a door that is visible from the street. I'm going to vote yes. When it gets to it, but it does frustrate me because the initial application could have taken a look at one last orientation of the building that might very well have worked. So thank you for showing us the process that you went through. I appreciate that. I see the problems that you had with the other orientations, but you didn't have the 180 degree or the Tetris orientation that actually might have answered the concern. So as I said, it frustrates me. I'm going to vote yes. I think it's a good application. I think we could have had a different discussion at the beginning, and I hope this passes. I would be happy to see you in town.
Thanks, Rachel. Any other board member comments? Jennifer?
I also appreciate the simplistic iterations of this, what you've gone through in terms of the site layout to help us understand where you've arrived at. With regard to the waivers, I do just have a question about the kind of the one-way dead-end parking orientation, and I'm curious if there's any way, or if you might be interested in signing that at the decision point, for lack of a better term, something like staff only beyond this point, or deliveries only, or something like that, just to kind of prevent patrons from getting wrapped around that corner and kind of stuck in there. But if you were to have staff or someone who is there, you know, more predictably and for longer periods of time, that might be more familiar with how to get in and out of that space.
Hi, Jen. Yeah, so one slight correction. I don't think you meant this. So it is a two-way. It's not a one-way. You can drive in, but you're right. If someone pulls in there and all the parking spots are done, they have to back up. I do know that Jean anticipates all of her lessees would be parking out back and coming in that back door. So I don't think I think it's actually a good idea to sign maybe employee parking, you know, over there, or maybe even stripe, not stripe, but maybe, you know, paint employee only, you know, in the parking spaces or something. So I'm speaking for her probably, but I think that's a good idea and something that we can do. We can figure something out on the staff level.
Yeah, I mean, certainly not, you wouldn't want like big full-size do not enter signs, wouldn't really fit with the character of this project, but you know, even just a small little 12 by 18 or something that's tasteful and helps reinforce that, I think would help out with on-site flow. And in that case, I understand the parking constraints and demand here and kind of the functionality of how that back area would operate in terms of serving the building, and I would be okay with a waiver for that.
And this is the employee entrance back here. If you can see my mouse where it sort of says end curb, there's a door there. So there really would be the intention of the staff and people that are working there would park back here so that these spaces are available to the general public.
That's all I have.
Thanks, Jennifer. All right, anyone else?
Mr. Chair, I would just say that I'm pretty much echo what my two colleagues have mentioned, but I would support the two waivers as proposed, but I like the idea of adding onto the waiver associated with dead end parking aisle design, that it be designated as employee or staff parking in this area. I think that's a really good compromise.
I
Thank
think
you.
Jamel is feverishly working up the language for us. Any other board member questions or comments? Okay. Don't be shy about speaking up. I have to scroll through the panel here to get a visual on everyone. All right. Well, that said, I have to agree with my colleagues. I think it's a good idea for the employees parking / striping solution to this. It's a beautiful building. It's you know, I think you've done a nice job. You've been really patient with us as you work through some of this. So it's a good project, and I think we're excited to have you welcome you into Scarborough. Jamel, you have a motion? on there somewhere? Thank you. Okay. I move to approve the site plan titled Mint Salon Block as depicted on the plan set prepared by Atlantic Resource Consultants dated 8/10/20 with the following findings, waivers, and conditions. Findings. The applicant is proposing to construct a 8,240 square foot, 1.5-story building that will consist of multiple private personal services spaces. The proposal also includes stormwater management infrastructure and pedestrian amenities. The project is located within the Igus Parkway District, HP zoning district. The project is proposed on lot 27 of the Enterprise Business Park subdivision. Planning Board has reviewed the application and supporting documentation and finds that the proposed design on the site plan adequately addresses the site plan review and zoning ordinance requirements for size, utilization, and layout, access, internal vehicular movement, parking, pedestrian ways, landscaping, stormwater management, lighting, architecture, signage, utilities, and storage. Waivers. 1, permit the proposed 24-foot parking aisle width. 2, permit the proposed dead-end parking aisle design. Conditions. 1, prior to the issuance of a building permit, the applicant shall revise the plan set to include a detail that includes the proposed granite pillar / naval chain fence. B, a plan note referencing the most recently recorded Enterprise Business Park subdivision plan, 6 amended. C, the addition of pavement markings with a dead-end parking area on the site identify these spaces as parking for employees only. This shall be reviewed and approved by the planning department. 2, prior to the issuance of a building permit, the applicant shall A, pay the traffic impact fees. B, execute and record the stormwater maintenance agreement as required by the post-construction stormwater infrastructure management ordinance. C, approval by the Scarborough Sanitary District. This shall be reviewed and approved by the planning department. 3, prior to the start of construction, the applicant shall coordinate the required pre-construction meeting. The meeting shall include appropriate town staff, the developer, and their site contractor, and is to be coordinated through the planning department.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Do we have any other board discussion? Okay, seeing none, I'll call a roll. Rachel Hendrickson,
Yes.
Jennifer Ladd,
Yes.
Robin Saunders,
Yes.
Roger Beely,
Yes.
Nicholas McGee. Yes. All right, congratulations, and thank you for working with us to get this done.
Thank you, everybody.
All right. The next item on tonight's agenda is Hayloft Apartments LLC requests a final subdivision and site plan review for Lot 3 of the town center residential neighborhood within the Downs, Assessors Map R52, Lot 4. Jamel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you may recall, this is located within the town center residential subdivision within the Downs. It's identified as Lot 3. The applicant's proposing to construct 4 nearly 3,600 square foot, 12-unit residential apartment buildings and 1 approximately 4,400 square foot building consisting of 10 residential apartment units and nearly 1,800 square feet of office space on the first floor. The board granted preliminary approval back in July. And as requested, the applicant has provided additional screening provisions adjacent to the proposed dumpster enclosure located along Hackamore Avenue. So the board should be sure to provide direction in regards to your comfort with the proposed screening. And I'll end it with staff has provided the board with a draft motion with conditions for your consideration. Turn it back to you.
Thank you, Jamel. Dan, you presenting tonight?
I am. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Great. Dan Bacon here on behalf of Hayloft Apartments LLC. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks, Jamel, for the introduction. The board has seen this a few different times now. We're through both the town center residential district overall and then preliminary subdivision review that you conducted a few meetings ago. We've worked quite hard with staff and town departments to be responsive to get this design dialed in per the district and per the town's ordinances. And also worked hard to address the board's comments since your last review. I'm really pretty excited about this little apartment project. We feel like it fits into the overall neighborhood quite well and has good connections to sidewalks and trails. And we're actually excited to hopefully call home that one of those buildings into the small commercial space that's going to be included in the building on the corner. So we've taken the board's suggestion and incorporated it here, and they're excited to have some small commercial space. So as introduced, we feel like we've addressed all the staff's comments through the process. As Jamel indicated, we did bolster the dumpster screening with some additional plantings, some cedar plantings to screen that location along the sidewalk. I think the other peer review comment was around coordinating a landscaping and snow storage. And Nick Aceto can't join us this evening, but he did remind our team that that was intentional, where snow storage is shown is where ornamental grasses are proposed, which are trimmed in the fall and are tolerant of snow storage. So he and Drew did work hard on coordinating that so that it wasn't impactful on landscaping that isn't as tolerant of snow storage. So I know you have a long agenda, so I'm not going to provide any more introduction, but I'm available for questions, and I know Drew is also on the line here to answer more technical questions, and we're hopeful for a final approval this evening on this final site and subdivision plan. So thanks.
Thanks, Dan. Appreciate it. We do allow public comment on this portion. If you are here in attendance and would like to speak on this item, please use the raise my hand feature. All right, I don't see any. I'm going to close public comment and we'll turn it over to the board. Does any of the board members have questions on this item? Rachel.
Yeah, I just happened to think of a couple of things. I noticed that the first floor of the building that has the commercial space, that apartment seemed to be handicapped accessible, or specifically done for the handicapped. I was wondering, there are other apartments that are being set aside or are designed to accommodate wheelchair disability accessibility. And the other thing I have is just a couple of general comments. One, I think these are really good looking apartments. They're not white. I think they fit really into the area because they look a little more like a house than a straight apartment building. They will fit well into the pocket community, which they are abutting. I want to emphasize again the concept of mixed use. I like the mixed use that you have here with the office building on the ground floor, an office. I really wish there was an office or some other use on the other side of the building. The amenities that have been built in the Downs thus far really are the natural amenities. They are the benches, the parks, the trails. But for people who are moving into apartments, as we get more and more apartments and condos, they are looking for amenities like coffee shops, places to gather once we can actually start gathering in person again. If they don't find those, they're going to be heading out to the highway. They're going to be going to Holy Donuts and Scarborough Grounds, or heading the other way for Dunkin' Donuts. And one of the things that we have talked about from the beginning is having enough there at the Downs that it would become a little more self-contained, that people would find in the Downs all of those things that they needed without adding to the traffic around Route 1 and Payne Road. So as you go further with additional condos or apartment buildings, please consider what sort of additional commercial amenities that you might want to put there that would keep people in the Downs area as WEX goes in, where they can stop and get some coffee and walk to work. That's very important to create a sense of community. So I hope you continue in this thread of a mixture of the commercial and the residential. And I have no problem with the waivers that have been requested. I think this is a very good project. Thank you.
Thanks, Rachel. Any other planning board members with questions or comments on this? All right, I didn't miss anyone, right?
Nick, I would just ask if, yeah, thanks. I would just ask if the applicant has seen the draft motion yet.
I don't. Dan, go ahead.
Just before the meeting, we were provided a copy of the draft motion to get a sense for the conditions. Yep.
So how do you plan to comply with the Woodard and Curran memo asking for snow storage?
Yeah, the snow storage locations have been designed deliberately where there's grass plantings that won't be impacted by the snow storage. Is that the question?
Yeah, I don't necessarily, you know, that I feel like needs to still be worked out with staff though still, because, you know, the snow storage packed down on top of ornamental grasses can definitely impact their growth. So I would just ask that you work with staff on that if what you have proposed is not to their liking. So I'd like to keep that condition number 1 as is.
We're pleased to work with staff on that. Yep.
Thank you. And you're fine with issuing of a sign permit and a final signage plan?
We are. Yep. Absolutely.
Great. And making sure that you schedule the pre-construction meeting with town staff. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Any other board members? See any? So Jamel.
Mr. Chair, I was just going to answer Ms. Hendrickson's question about ADA accessibility on the within the apartment units.
Sure, go ahead.
Typically, all the first floor units are designed to have that accessibility to answer that question. So, and they're designed deliberately to be barrier free for that purpose.
All right. Jamel, do you have a motion for us to put up on the screen? All right. I move to approve the project titled Town Center Residential Neighborhood, Hayloft Apartments, as depicted on the plan set prepared by Goral Palmer dated 8/10/20. The following findings, waivers, and conditions. Findings: the applicant is proposing to construct 4 3,596 square foot, 12-unit residential apartment buildings and 1 4,416 square foot building consisting of 10 residential units and 1,770 square feet of office space on the first floor. The proposal also consists of pedestrian infrastructure, landscaping provisions, and parking. The project is located within Lot 3 of the Town Center Residential Neighborhood Subdivision within the Downs and is further identified on the Town of Scarborough tax map R52 Lot 4. The planning board has reviewed the application and supporting documentation and finds that the proposed design on the subdivision adequately addresses the requirements of the subdivision ordinance, site plan review ordinance, zoning ordinance, and the standards set forth in the Town Center Residential District space and bulk standards and design and performance standard. Waivers: 1, permit the requested parking aisle width of 24 feet. 2, permit the proposed driveway separation of approximately 25 feet from the southern driveway along Hayloft Lane. Conditions: 1, prior to the signing and release of the final subdivision plan, plan set shall be revised to address the remaining review comments in the civil peer review memo by Woodard and Curran dated 8/20/20. This shall be reviewed and approved by the planning department. 2, prior to the issuance of a building permit, the applicant shall A, pay the traffic impact fees, B, pay the recreation contribution fees. This shall be reviewed and approved by the planning department. 3, prior to the issuance of a sign permit, the applicant shall provide the final signage plan. This shall be reviewed and approved by the planning department. 4, prior to the start of construction, a pre-construction meeting is required. The meeting shall include appropriate town staff, the developer, and their site contractor, and is to be coordinated through the planning department. And this is the motion.
Second.
I have a second. Any further discussion from the board? All right, seeing none, I'm going to call a roll. Rachel Hendrickson,
Yes.
Roger Beely,
Yes.
Robin Saunders,
Yes.
Jennifer Ladd,
Yes.
Nick McGee. Yes. Thank you and congratulations.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Next item on tonight's agenda is Stanley Bailey requests a site plan amendment review for 161 and 165 Pine Point Road. Assessors map R68, lots 6B and 6C. Jamel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This project's located in the R2 zoning district at the corner of Pine Point Road and Old Blue Point Road. Proposal includes several elements on the property that have already been completed without planning board approval, along with several elements that have not been completed on the property that are proposed. So the applicant should discuss these elements both after the fact and propose with the board this evening. As noted in the staff review memo, the applicant has installed a crushed stone drive that appears to provide a direct connection to the abutting property, residential property to the east of the project. Staff remains unclear why a nearly 30-foot wide driveway is necessary, as no activity associated with these businesses or other commercial activity is permitted on the residential lot unless otherwise approved through a separate permitting process. If the board determines that the gravel drive may remain, staff has recommended that the applicant reduce the width of this drive and consider additional screening provisions between the properties. Staff was unable to find any materials related to stormwater management, given the increase in impervious area on the site since the board's last review. So the applicant should provide a detailed stormwater plan with future submissions. The staff has also noted that the site plan standards require buffers be provided to shield structures and uses from abutting properties. As the board may recall, the applicant planted a row of arborvitae trees along the southern and eastern property boundaries as a buffering provision back in 2018. The applicant should be prepared to discuss the effectiveness of this buffer and if any additional plantings or other buffering provisions should be provided that may result in a more robust or an effective buffer for neighboring properties. At this point, I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Jamel. For the applicant, Darren White, is that correct? And you are on mute, Darren, if that's what you're looking for.
Yes.
Hi, Darren.
Hey, how are you tonight?
Good. All right, are you going to be presenting?
Yes, I'm going to be presenting for Mr. Bailey about the residential driveway and the restaurant and ice cream property.
All right, go ahead.
All right, so the reasoning behind the gravel driveway from the residential property to the non-conforming residential property is that before the trees were cut, there was a gravel pathway that the previous owner had used to access the two businesses or business lots that they owned. And then so now that the daughter of the business owners resides in that residence with a few health issues and past surgeries and stuff, it's easy access from the residence to the two businesses. Also that at the present time, there's 4 licensed drivers in the residence, and the driveway that's on the Old Blue Point roadside isn't very convenient for 4 vehicles to be in the driveway. If one has to leave that's parked in front, the other one has to back out onto Old Blue Point Road to allow the one in front to back out, and it messes with traffic. And so that's why the pathway was made into a drive, just to ease the traffic congestion at 154 Old Blue Point Road. We did add on the northwest side of the drive, we added a 2-foot by 1 foot deep berm of mulch berm for water erosion. And so I was in talking with New England Civil Solutions or Northeast Civil Solutions about the the concerns of the board members about the crossing between the commercial and the non-commercial properties, that there is no business parking in that drive allowed. And that if it would suffice the board, if we was to put up a 4x4 post with a sign that said private drive, no business parking, et cetera, et cetera.
All right, is that it for the presentation tonight?
No, on the other situations of there was in the staff comments, there was a comment I read somewhere. I didn't receive anything back after my last submittal. The existing tent and patio area, I thought that had been cleared up with Mr. Bailey in the town of Scarborough on a previous date. So that's why there was nothing submitted as far as the existing tent and patio area. A lot of the things that we're asking for were pre-existing things on the south side of the property. There was before the trees were cut, there was an above ground 1,000 gallon propane tank. And I've talked with Dead River about instead of having an unsightly 1,000 gallon propane tank back in that area, to actually put a 1,000 gallon tank in the ground to their specs. So that way the neighbors don't have to look at it coming and going. The location of shed 3 was a pre-existing location of the 8x10 shed, which has been replaced with a 10x12 new shed because the 8x10 shed was weathered and started looking decrepit. So rather than put the old beat up shed back up in the original location, Mr. Bailey purchased a new shed and placed it there. There's been concerns from the town and the neighbors, looking at the dumpsters. So that's why we have proposed to put in a dumpster pad with a stockade fence enclosure. So you don't have to look directly at the dumpsters. It'd be more of an ease on the eyes. There have been concerns from the neighbors about the noisy refrigeration equipment on the back side of the restaurant. And that's why I've proposed to put up a 6-foot high stockade fence now coming out another 6 feet or 4 to 6 feet off the back of the building to enwrap the back of the refrigeration equipment, so the sound doesn't go outward towards the neighbors. It would be more directed in the air away from the neighboring properties. Also, the pre-existing shed behind the ice cream property, it was on the property line on the west side of it would be the south side property line before the trees were removed. And when we cut the trees, we put the shed over on the north side of the property against the residential property line, just so nothing would happen to it as we cut the trees and removed it and did all the landscaping. And now we're proposing to put it back in the central location of the back of the property. When I first submitted the impervious area on the back of the ice cream shop, didn't meet the criteria of the under, I think, 80% run impervious area. So under advisory of Northeast Civil Solutions, I extended the loam and seed area on the back of the ice cream property to 17 feet across the back of the property to be well below the 80%. I can't remember. I talked with Troy with the exact number of the impervious surface, but we were well below that, 79.9, I think. And also, as far as the arborvitaes that we had planted, I know that from the planting till now, I think 12 of them I counted the other day. 12 of them have died off, and I was hoping that they would live because it's quite a little costly endeavor to replace them. But I've noticed that 12 of them have died, and that I got in contact with O'Donnell Nursery last week to get 12 replacements for those arborvitaes that have died, to bring it back up to what we had proposed to do in the original plan. So other than that, I think that touches base on everything. A lot of this stuff was done pre-approval because of the COVID-19, and progress. We was trying to make progress while we could, while the good weather was here, with the hopes that the customers would be coming back when COVID was over. And so, are there any other questions?
Thanks. We'll take it from here. We have an opportunity for public comment on this item. If you are here in attendance and would like to speak on this item, please use the raise my hand feature. All right, seeing none, I'm going to turn this over to the board. I'm just going to start by saying, that COVID caught everyone off guard, but it just doesn't give you carte blanche to just kind of start doing what you want. There's a lot of applicants that are on this agenda here that have waited, a good amount of time, have been through our process a number of times. And this is one of those shame on you scenarios. I hate to be so blunt about it, but this is not
a lot of it was,
and it's not the first time. And I will say that it is disappointing that it does not appear that you're looking to cooperate with the rules and regulations that are set forth here in the town regarding these types of properties.
I most definitely am, sir.
So
a lot of the stuff. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. We'll ask you our questions. Okay. I'll turn this over to Robin. You want to go first?
Sure. So I couldn't find the staff memo for this, but I guess I would echo what you're saying, Mr. Chair, in that, some things just need to wait. The 30-foot driveway, I still haven't heard why we need to have a 30-foot driveway. If it's, nope, it's okay. I guess other things are pre-existing, like the tent and patio area. We still need a full-size plan. Having four licensed drivers in a home does not give you the right to have a street opening to two different streets or a different parcel. So I think we have to choose which one. If you're going to propose a mulch berm, we need to have a long-term maintenance plan with that. A mulch berm needs to be revisited at least every 6 months to make sure that that is not flushed away. So you may be doing yourself a disservice to do something as temporary as a mulch berm for stormwater management. And with all the increased stormwater management, there are some rules that need to be complied with. And again, have you sought help from DEP at all on this? I guess that's my one question I'd like answered.
Help from DEP on what?
On your improved impervious area, if you need to get permits with them?
No, because I was under the understanding from Northeast Civil Solutions that I fell under the acceptable amount.
Okay. I guess, I'd like something in writing on that then. Otherwise, we need documentation of that usually. Providing buffers, arborvitae, channeling my inner Susan Oglis, who was a planning board member for many years. Arborvitaes are not an effective buffer, or not robust enough to buffer either traffic or your neighbors. So I agree that a more robust landscape plan is forthcoming, and I get that all these things cost money. But this is sort of where we are with progressing forward. In order to make money, you have to spend money. And I know these are very hard times, and I hope that you've been able to benefit from some of the programs that are out there, but I'll stop right there and let others sort of ask questions.
Okay,
Thanks, Robin.
thank you.
Roger?
I tend to agree with the previous comments regarding the gravel driveway. I think you've got to deal with that. I would just remind our fellow board members that this property with the arborvitaes was before the board sometime, maybe a couple of years ago, and apparently the board, I was on the board at that time, and we approved with the arborvitae. So I asking the applicant right now to do something regarding those, other than replace the ones that are dying. I'm not sure that's fair, but I'll leave it up to other board members to make a decision on that as well. I don't have any problem with everything else that they want to do. I do also want to comment though, I think this is an example where people who have lived in town maybe for many, many years just are used to doing things a certain way. And unfortunately, times have changed and there are a lot of requirements now for the benefit of everybody. And this is another example where you just can't go and do things because you want to do them. Sometimes you're better off to check with the town officials to make sure you've got all your bases covered. So I'll just leave it at that, I guess, right now.
Thanks, Roger.
I've been trying to, I'm sorry.
Rachel?
Yeah, I'm in accord with my colleagues. I believe that the gravel drive should be removed and additional buffering put across where the current drive is. I'm not clear that we actually approved arborvitae as the sole buffer. I would have to go back
Yes, ma'am.
and I trust Roger's memory. But I do think what's been discovered is that perhaps much more of a buffer needs to be there if the plantings are delicate and likely to die, and one of them dies, and there's some other buffering there, other planting there, there's less of an immediate issue. I think the attempt to put the stockade fence around the dumpster and to screen the noise from the neighbors, I have no problem with that. I think that's helpful, but it was something that was supposed to come to us with all of the other things going on in this property.
Haven't done that yet.
Stop.
So the dumpster I have not.
Excuse me, sir. So that I don't think having four drivers in a house is a reason to put in a 30-foot drive when there is already a connection between the two lots. You simply have to walk down the street. There's already a road connecting. So I would not be in favor of removing of setting up essentially a second driveway for the house. Bailey's is a long-term business. I like the food there. It's a good business. It's a business that has a long tradition and reputation with this town. But sometimes, as I think it was Roger said, sometimes you just kind of get ahead of yourself. And this is a time when folks got ahead of themselves and Unfortunately, that means sometimes you have to pay for doing that. So I would like to see this back with more landscaping, with more buffering. If it's possible to provide any landscaping around the any of the big sheds, that would be nice to see. I'm not sure where they're set up that that's possible, but if the sheds are not on the asphalt, then providing some landscaping around there would be very helpful. Thank you.
Thanks, Rachel. Jennifer?
I don't necessarily have any additional points, but appreciate comments from other board members and share many of their concerns. It sounds like hopefully we can look forward to some additional detailed plans in the future about how to mitigate some of these things.
Thanks, Jennifer. Rick Duperi, do you have anything to add? All right, I don't hear anything from Rick at this moment. Rick Meinking, do you have anything?
No, I don't have anything additional. I agree that I'm not sure we need that 30-foot driveway either. But otherwise, I agree with my fellow board members.
All right, so Mr. White, do you have any clarifying questions before you come back? Is it something that you'll probably reach out to staff with ahead of time? Just to make sure that we're getting on the same page here. Do you have enough instruction and guidance from us?
Yeah, so as far as the drive, the back drive, would it be acceptable if it was narrowed and a signage was to put up for the resident to have access to both businesses? Because there's multiple trips, multiple times a day back and forth. And, you know, the walk from out around and down Old Blue Point Road or what have you, it's just more convenient. There's been knee surgeries and other surgeries that make the health issues, you know, it's very trying throughout the day to have to go multiple trips to the restaurant and the ice cream shop. You know, and the previous owner had, you know, a pathway of sorts, and now, you know, from the 60s or whenever to the present time, you know, the ease of having the driveway to be able to leave the residents to go, you know, to go to the other businesses, you know, if that would be acceptable.
Roger, go ahead.
Yeah, I would be agreeable to a path in lieu of the regular driveway. So that's not a big issue for me.
And I've also seen some shaking heads here. I think the path is probably your better solution. Jennifer, do you have something to add to that?
Yeah, only just that you know, I do see some logic in taking advantage of an existing path or trail connection that may have been there. I don't think a 30-foot driveway is in that spirit, but I would also just encourage you to take a look at any sort of ADA guidance in terms of pathways or, you know, multi-use path facilities that can be substantially less significant than a 30-foot wide gravel driveway even could present, you know, some mobility challenges from someone navigating over that in anything other than a car or something wheeled, I guess. But there's a lot of good guidance out there in terms of how to create facilities that are passable and accessible for those with physical challenges and really just anyone. And you can, you know, there is information about width and surface treatment and all of those types of things. So that something along those lines, I would be more supportive of. for, you know, understanding that there is a connection between the current residential owner and the business owners. But I do also think about this in terms of moving beyond just the current business plan and property owner. And so I do think allowing such a significant driveway like that could present a difficult situation. Say, for example, if the residential property and or the business parcel were ever sold off, just, you know, usage wise down the road, that could be a tricky situation that we would be getting into. So anyway, I would just also encourage the removal of the current driveway as it is, and suggest that maybe someone look towards some more dedicated ADA guidance in terms of how to provide accessible path or linkage between the two properties.
Thanks, Jennifer. And I don't want to belabor the point too much, but I agree. I think the real concern is the future uses of these parcels down the line and how they would interact. And I also don't want to come off as saying that what's been done there is certainly a visual improvement over what had been there previously. I can appreciate the effort and taking pride in both the businesses and the homes. I think the underlying sentiment here is that we would have definitely preferred to have seen you prior to these improvements before implementing them. And it probably would have saved you a lot of time, effort, and money had you talked to staff and the board first. So with that, Rachel, go ahead.
Yeah, let me just echo a little bit of what Jen was talking about. I would not object to a narrow ADA path between the two properties. However, it seems to me as a condition for that going in should be something that says if either of the properties are sold, so that they are not owned by basically the same owners, that there would be some sort of a fence put across or demarcation, clearing, making it very clear that it really is two separate properties. So that might be, digging up 2 feet of the path and putting in a fence. But I think the future use right now, an ADA path may be needed in 5 years with new tenants or new owners someplace. It might not be what they are interested in, and they actually might be concerned that all of a sudden people can be coming from either side onto their property. So something that says upon sale, a portion of that path must be removed or blocked off between the two properties.
Thanks, Rachel. Any other planning board comments? No, Mr. White? Any further questions? Any clarifications that you need?
No, so I was just, as far as the driveway, as far as the rest of the proposed shed locations and the propane tank and the the replacement of the arborvitaes, does everything else seem kosher as far as it was viewed on the plans and all that?
I'm comfortable with changes to the driveway and replacing the dead arborvitaes at this point.
Okay.
So I could jump in, Mr. Chair. I think one of the board members did request some additional information about the mulch berm and maintenance of that as well.
Yeah. Can I quickly ask Angela if she has is she sharing some of those concerns about the stormwater impacts of the berm or anything like that? I hate to put you on the spot, Angela, but.
I think the other point that was made is getting clarification in writing from a P or through DEP that their grandfathered status on their impervious surfaces and what they've added over the years. and what they're up to as far as accumulated impervious area would be helpful in knowing really what the significance and the impact would be. Obviously, as you guys pointed out, a 30-foot driveway adds some impervious area that they were trying to accommodate, but it was more of a short-term kind of fix, sort of, with the berm. So to that point, I guess I would also echo that concern. So it looks like some more work could be done, or some clarification maybe for documenting and putting in the file on where they're at, so that as things move forward in the future too, we kind of have a starting point too, to know as they come in with any additional improvements on the site, we'll know where they're at and can kind of track that and follow it. So I think that would be helpful from my point of view.
Okay, thank you for that.
So, question, sir. So if I'm removing the driveway and making it a pathway, then why would I have to provide berm information as far as water or impervious on that area?
I guess you wouldn't have to in that specific area. I think it starts with making sure we understand when different areas of impervious surface were added at that site, because there's certain probably areas that are grandfathered and some that are not. And so you can kind of look at the cumulative effect. And so where the board is heading for pulling this back, like you said, to a path, then obviously that would go away as well, the mulch berm that you're talking about. But we still need to know where you're at with the whole site in general.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And Mr. White, you can always, staff is incredibly accommodating at any point in the process. You know, I'll speak for them on this. Feel free to reach out to them. They are helpful. And they do try to point everyone in the right direction. So with that, any other questions or comments from either the board or the applicant on this point? No? All right, good luck, Mr. White. We'll see you in a few weeks.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Next item tonight is Triton Corporation requests a final subdivision review for 96 Gorham Road, Assessors Map R54, Lot 11. Jamel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you may recall, this project is located in the VR4 zoning district along Gorham Road. So the applicant did submit a final subdivision plan for the 16 lot residential subdivision consisting of 14 single family lots and two duplex lots. The proposal also includes a sidewalk along the proposed public street, village green and open space, a recreational trail, and stormwater management infrastructure. The board did grant preliminary approval back at your last meeting in August. And at this point, I'll ask Angela, I think she has a few comments related to stormwater drainage. Thanks.
The only comment I had left was related to, as I think you can see up on the plan that they're showing, lot 16 and the abutter. That lot line is very tight. And there's also, in addition, there's a trail that goes through there, plus trying to direct the runoff from the lot, as well as the existing house that sits there. Their yard actually drains to a low point there. And so I think board members have probably seen my reoccurring comment related to how that drains out, because there is a definite low spot from the abutting property down towards their lot 16. And I think the design engineer has responded to that and provided some additional grading. It's just not clear still that that water will make it back to the wetland. And I just want to make sure we don't ending up with a puddle or a ponding area, because right now, without these lots developed, that yard is allowed to freely drain back to the wetland. And so it's on this applicant to make sure that they're not impacting the upstream neighbor. So they would have to make sure that they can accommodate the flow through their site. And that's part of the requirements, is that you're not impacting abutters. And that's usually we talk about it about downstream abutters, but that's also true for upstream abutters. So I just want to make sure that we have, I guess, flag that still to make sure we can get that to drain. It is extremely tight through there with very small window to try to get a lot of things that are happening in there. That's all I had.
Thanks, Angela. And for the applicant, Mr. Cormier, you presenting this evening?
Yeah, thank you, Nick. And thank you, board members. Thank you, Jamel. I think you provided a good overview of where we're at. So I'll probably just start by jumping into comments from last meeting and staff comments. So I guess I'll just start with Angela in relation to the drainage adjacent to that lot 16 there. I agree with you, it's tight. Like you mentioned, I guess I should also add that Rich Lucina from Lewis and Lucina Inc. and Owens McCullough are also on the line as well from Sebago. I agree with you, the drainage is tight in that area. I provided a blow up for the presentation here just to kind of show you kind of what you stated there. Rich has gathered some additional topography in that area. We've added some definition to the drainage swale to the north of the trail there, just to kind of show that stormwater can be conveyed from behind that trail to the wetland area. I definitely agree with you that it's tight, but I think we've gathered the additional topography needed to kind of prove that it works. We feel comfortable with kind of where the design's at with that. Some additional comments from the preliminary approval process. Staff had some comments about the termination of the Stone Dust Trail. In addition to providing connection to the Scarborough Land Conservation Trust, I believe they wanted connection to Holbrook Farms Way near the Hammerhead on the end of the at the end of the roadway, which we've done in the revised plan. Additionally, they wanted a connection in the proximity to Gorham Road. We ended up connecting to Holbrook Farms close to Gorham Road, mostly in part to thinking of the safety of the users of the pathway. With cars turning in and out of Gorham Road onto Holbrook Farms Way, we wanted to connect the trail a little bit farther down the roadway, which we're showing there. I'm not sure. Let me know if you guys can't see it well in the presentation. So we've incorporated both those changes with the Stone Dust Trail, and I think that addressed the comments from the last planning board meeting. Since the submission of the final subdivision application, we received a few additional staff comments, one being the grading and drainage next to that lot 16, which we just went over, and then one comment in relation to the sewer easement adjacent to the property owned by Carl Hubbard, in which we've submitted the draft easement documentation to the staff, and we'll provide final easement documentation once it's finalized. In addition to that, the applicant's been working on just addressing some final design comments from the Portland Water District. Per their current review standards, they like to resolve all design comments prior to issuing a ability to serve letter. They've issued that, or they've indicated that they have no issues or concerns with the capacity or the ability to serve. We're just wrapping up a few of the last comments and should be receiving that approval from them shortly, and we'll forward to the board once received. Other than that, I think we feel we've addressed any outstanding comments to date, and I'll open it up to the board for any additional questions or comments at this time.
Thanks, Corey. We have an opportunity for public comment on this item. If you are here in attendance and would like to speak towards the issue at hand, please use the raise my hand feature on the bottom right-hand corner of your Zoom. All right, seeing none, I'm going to close public comment and turn this back over to the board. Jen, do you want to go first?
Sure. Any questions that I had originally, you addressed in your presentation, but I did just want to thank you for work surrounding the additional grading information and also the trail connection. I think it's a much more comprehensive and connected facility now, which I think will just benefit everyone. And I think it's really going to be a great amenity to this neighborhood. And I'm happy to hear that you're going to be able to work out links with the Scarborough Land Trust. So anyway, I look forward to seeing that.
Thanks, Jennifer. Rachel?
Yeah, I echo Jen's comments. As soon as I got the materials from Doreen, I immediately took a look to see if you connected the trail, and you had. So I think that's now allows people at both ends of the development to, in some cases, meet in the middle and get together and have a picnic once we can do that with appropriate social distancing. I think you've really responded to our questions. I appreciate the work you've done, and congratulations and good luck with this.
Thanks, Rachel. Roger?
Really no questions. I think it looks good. As long as Angela's satisfied, I'm all set.
Thanks, Roger. Robin?
Yeah, I was just wondering if, I'm looking at the waivers, and I was wondering if at the last meeting, the planning board had discussed only having the sidewalk on one side of the road.
Yeah, we did. And I think what we came up with was because of the path as well, kind of served as the pedestrian access on a couple fronts there.
Yep, I remember that. Okay, then I am all set with all three waivers, and just would echo Angela's comment on making sure that runoff from upstream abutters is considered and making sure that that's taken care of. Thank you.
Thanks, Robin. Rick Duperi?
I don't really have any questions. I think it looks fine for which way it is.
Thank you. Rick Munking?
I have nothing to add. I do appreciate how the applicant worked with the staff, and I like the path, the way you extended it and can get across the street there and join in with the sidewalk. Looks like a nice development and lots of nice open space, and appreciate that. And good luck.
Thanks, Rick. Roger?
Didn't you get my first comments?
Oh boy, who did I miss? Rachel? I knew I missed somebody.
Would you make sure that's in the record?
Oh no. That's what happens when you turn 40, right? All right, so
I changed my mind.
Okay. I just knew you had something to say. So I'll add that I think this has been incredibly smooth as far as subdivisions and prelims and looking at this. So I congratulate the applicant and their team for doing a nice job on the presentation and working with the board and staff to bring this along. So that said, we do have a motion this evening. And if Jamel, you could pop that up on the screen for everyone, I would appreciate it.
Yeah, I think the applicant needs to unshare for me to share. Then I'll share the motion. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I move to approve the project titled Holbrook Farms proposed by Triton Corporation as depicted on the plan set prepared by Sebago Technics dated 8/10/20 with the following findings, waivers, and conditions. Findings: the applicant is proposing a 16-lot subdivision consisting of 14 single-family lots and 2 duplex lots. The proposal also consists of a new public street, village green, and open space, a recreational trail, stormwater management infrastructure, and a sidewalk along the entirety of Holbrook Way. Property is located within the Village Residential 4 VR4 zoning district as identified on the Town of Scarborough's tax maps as map R54 lot 11. Planning Board has reviewed the application and supporting documentation and finds that the proposed design of the site plan adequately addresses the subdivision and zoning ordinance requirements. Waivers: 1. Waive the standard for a grid layout of interconnected streets given that the Planning Board finds that the natural characteristics of the lot and the scale of the development is not conducive to an interconnected street layout. 2, permit the proposed street width of 22 feet. 3, permit a sidewalk along one side of the road given the scale of proposed residential development. Conditions: prior to the release of the signed final subdivision plan for recording, the plan set shall be revised to include additional spot grades to ensure adequate drainage adjacent to lot 16 and the proposed recreational trail as noted in the staff review memo dated 8/24/20. It shall be reviewed and approved by the planning department. Prior to the release of the signed final subdivision plan, the applicant shall A, execute and record the maintenance agreement as required by the post-construction stormwater management ordinance. B, secure the required performance guarantee with the town engineer. C, provide draft easement documentation for the proposed sewer easement associated with the abutting property located directly at the east of lot 16, N/F Carl Hubbard. 3, prior to the issuance of a building permit, the applicant shall A, pay the traffic impact fees. B, provide approval by the Portland Water District. C, pay the recreational contribution fees. 4, prior to the start of construction, a pre-construction meeting is required. The meeting shall include appropriate town staff, the developer, and their site contractor, and is to be coordinated through the planning department. That is the motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second from Ms. Saunders. I'll do roll call. Rachel Hendrickson,
Yes.
Robin Saunders,
Yes.
Roger Beely,
Yes.
Jennifer Ladd,
Yes.
Nicholas McGee, yes. So that 5-0. Thank you very much and good luck to you.
Thank you for your time. Have a good evening.
You too.
Thank you.
Item number 11 on tonight's agenda is Ann Child Enterprises LLC requests a site plan review for 79 County Road, Assessors Map R15, Lot 78. Jamel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you may recall, this application is located in the TPC2 zoning district at the corner of County Road and Saco Street. As a reminder, the applicant's proposing to construct a 1,000 square foot drive-through coffee shop, and the applicant was last before the board back in December of 2019. As the board may recall, the development will result in 130 vehicle trips during the AM peak hour. So given the significant amount of trips along a very busy commuter corridor, the town's traffic consultants have offered comments related to the required offsite improvements. So the applicant should discuss these improvements and how they will tie into the Saco Street and County Road intersection. Staff would also like to note that the development requires a traffic movement permit from Maine DOT prior to the board granting final approval of the site plan. As requested, the applicant has provided some 3D renderings of the building that include the proposed landscaping provisions. So the applicant should discuss these renderings with the board this evening. Given the feedback from the board during prior reviews of the project, staff has recommended that the applicant enhance the building's facades, perhaps using some false windows, as this design would adhere to the commercial design standards. So the board should be sure to discuss this recommendation this evening. And the applicant is proposing 5 future parking spaces along with the proposed 5 spaces for the project. The zoning ordinance does allow for the board to reduce off-street parking requirements if it is determined that the use can be occupied with fewer spaces. The board should be sure to provide direction on the proposed parking. At this point, I'll turn it over to Angela to discuss the proposed stormwater management system. Thanks.
Thanks. I think the board has seen this before in the proposed impervious porous pavement that's proposed at the site. And I guess one of the things that we haven't had a conversation around, and I just want to make sure the board makes an informed decision on this particular application. In the past, this site, as you've seen with past approvals for the site, it's very flat. There is not a clear location to outlet for stormwater runoff. And so it really is key for this site to infiltrate into the ground. This site also has the issue that it is in the Aquifer Protection Overlay District. So one of the conversations we've had in the past at this site, again, different BMPs, different applicants, is talking about the direct connection to the groundwater as the stormwater is infiltrating. And so I just want to make sure that the planning board is clear that with the new application, we need to have that conversation and make sure that we're looking at it in all of the aspects, and that this porous pavement will be using infiltration without a clear outlet, under drain outlet, as in some cases it is. I think the applicant and the designer is really in a tough situation where we don't really have a clear avenue to provide if we wanted an under drain to outlet this. So I just want to make sure that that's part of the conversation. And I'm happy to chime in as we have that discussion, but I just want to make sure that we're kind of closing that loop and that it's an informed decision by the planning board.
Thanks, Angela. And for the applicant, who's presenting this evening?
That would be me, sir. Sean Thies with CES. And thank you, Jamel and Angela, for that recap. I will share my screen. So since we were in front of the board, I believe in January now, I think, we had feedback at that meeting on our plan. We've made some changes. I would say sort of the most obvious change is the way the entrance comes into the site. We've moved that further away from Saco Street, so it's comes straight in a little bit further for, I guess, potential of future development on here. If that were to occur, the driveway would continue on into the site, and this would be more of a tee off of that. So we've moved that away from Saco Street a little bit in this area. That put some more green space in here, with allowed us to do some grading for potential, say, overflow off of the pavement to get into this grass area. The rest of the layout is pretty similar to what you saw the last time when we presented. As Jamel had mentioned, we have 5 proposed spaces here, 5 future spaces over here, which would be graded out, but it would be seeded. I thought we had addressed that at the last meeting, and that was approved by the board, but I could be mistaken. But I guess to keep things moving, would you like me to just go through the staff comments and address each one as we go down through it, or what would be the best way to
I think on the main points, the staff comments.
Yeah, so I think the first main comment, and Jamel just mentioned it, was in regards to the building facade. So we have renderings now for the building. This would be from the corner of Saco and County Road, looking towards, you can see the sidewalk coming up to the intersection. I believe the comment was potentially adding some false windows on the south and west sides of the building. So that would be, this is the south end and this is the west end. Our initial response was, this building is a sort of a package type building, if you will. It's obviously built on site, but it's a model for the franchise for Aroma Joe's. So the layout inside the building is either there's equipment or storage and things like that inside. So it's put a window in certain areas. It wouldn't serve any purpose from the inside of the building. So I guess we'd be looking for direction from the board if the board felt that there was a need for some additional facade treatment on this building. Keep in mind the building is relatively small. So on this end, on the gable, there's a fairly good size area here. And I don't know if you want to comment on any of these, or you want me to just go through them all first, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, go ahead and just continue through them, and then we'll address the board afterwards.
Yep. Similarly to the stormwater, as Angela mentioned, the site is extremely flat. We're proposing porous pavement with a filter layer under the pavement. It's similar to, so the previous project that was approved here had, I believe it had bioretention cells or under drain soil filters with a filter layer similar to what the porous pavement has. In their instance, they then had an under drain, which took the water to a different portion of the site where it then infiltrated. So it was still infiltration on the site. Not really any different than what we're doing. It was just, for whatever reason, and I'm guessing it had more to do with storage because they were a lot bigger development, so they needed the underground storage as part of that, but it's still infiltrated into the groundwater. So similar to what was proposed before. There was a comment about installing curbing along the in front of the current driveway at the former house here. So there's a driveway that comes in, gravel driveway, and staff was suggesting putting curbing across here. The preference would be so there's no plans to use this house currently, and there's not a plan to demolish it at this point. So rather than put a permanent curb across the end of that, we would propose some other sort of barrier, whether it's larger rocks or something else that could go in as sort of a temporary fashion and can more easily be removed if that house was to have some sort of future use and that driveway were to, we feel that'd be easier than having curb put in and then lose that, I guess, curb cut forever. Comment about auto turn for a fire truck. So we've added that. This shows vehicles in queue. This shows the ladder truck coming around through the bypass lane on the site, around all those cars and exiting the site. So we can provide that separately to staff. There was a comment on landscape buffering on the north part of the site. And the comment from staff was it appeared that we had only added one tree. So that's true on the landscape plan. They added one tree, but we also added a section of stockade fence along this section of the property line. So the fence shows up on the landscape plan as well, but it wasn't called out. It's called out on the site plan, and then you'll see it on the landscape plan as well as the additional trees in front of it. In regards to the number of open signs and a request for updated building elevation views, we haven't revised the building elevations, that the building itself hasn't changed, but we've removed the open sign that was near the walk-up window to the building. So that would be on the east side of the building. Which was so that is the front of the building. That would be this sign here. So that's been removed. And we've noted on the plan for a stockade fence enclosure around the dumpster, but we have not provided a detail for that, but we can provide that to staff or to the board if the board wants to see that. We've addressed drainage on the Saco Street side, or the comment came in regards to if the porous pavement should become clogged or not be able to handle the amount of rain in a particular storm, to keep the water from going out into either of the road right-of-ways. So we've graded this swale in a depression on this side with a small pipe to bring that across to the side of the site. We've also recently added some spot grades along this end of the site to show that the water will come around and not out to County Road. I think the only other comments, and I do have cut sheets for the lights. I don't know how helpful it would be to show those tonight, but I have those and we can provide those. The only other comments I think are more related to the off-site improvements on Saco Street. And I'd be happy to, I guess, go through that memo as well. From Malone.
I think it'd be worthwhile to address some of the offsite improvement stuff.
Okay. On the Malone and McBroom memo, comment number 1 is regarding providing right-of-way. I believe that was addressed early on in the project where we provided easements, which are shown on the plan. So we said we would have easements for the town to accommodate work on the intersection improvements and potential widenings of the road. As far as crash data, we can update that information. We have rerun the numbers based on comments from Malone and McBroom on traffic signal timing. That actually reduces the length of the left turn lane, which was part of their comment on 3 and the need for a longer turn lane into our site. Our traffic engineer is on the meeting tonight, Victor Smith. I don't know if Jamel saw him to be able to allow him to enter, but he could answer more specific questions regarding the traffic modeling and things like that. But we feel what we're showing for a 50-foot turn lane into the site is more than adequate for the numbers. The comment about redesigning. So we have a plan, and I will show it here. And we discussed this with the town and the town's consultants. We actually mentioned it as something that was a bit of a, not necessarily a concern, but something that just looks odd. The way we did our offsite design of Saco Street based on the design that was being proposed for the intersection improvements at Saco Street and County Road. And in order to line up with the lanes where they are now or where they are being proposed and accommodate a future sidewalk on the west side of Saco Street, it creates this jog. You can see this lane line that comes over and then back down. So preferably you would come straight through Saco Street, straight across County Road, and that would just be a straight line all the way down through. But because of the way the intersection was designed and the need to add a sidewalk or room for a sidewalk on the west side, it creates this jog. And I believe that's what is referred to in item number 4 on the Malone and McBroom memo. And it's not really, I guess, clear what the best way to address this. Ideally, these improvements and the intersection improvements all happen at the same time. But we met with the town and we talked about ways that could happen. And it became clear that these would have to be 2 sort of independent projects. And the town isn't sure when the intersection improvements might take place. And we can't construct the improvements on Saco Street without having this jog in that lane, either with the intersection as it currently exists or with the design as it currently exists. Now, I'm not sure the town's consultant may be looking at redesigning this, I'm not sure, but either way, there's sort of a gap here where not knowing when the intersection would be improved, that we're in a position where we can't construct our portion of the work without that other work being done. So I think that's a discussion point that we'd like to have with the board on how this timing could all potentially work for those improvements. And I think that's pretty much it as far as the staff comments and the peer review comments. I mean, there wasn't much from Woodard and Curran on their comments. I think it just referred to make sure that we're meeting the standards for the aquifer protection. I think that goes back to stormwater that we've already discussed.
You all set?
I think so, until you have some specific questions for me. I don't want to take up too much of everybody's time, but.
All right, thank you. We do have opportunity for public comment on this item. And if you are here in attendance and would like to speak on this item, please use the raise my hand feature. All right, seeing none, I'm going to turn this over to the board. I do have a quick follow-up on for staff. I think would probably be the appropriate place for this. I think the applicant has a good question regarding their improvements versus, you know, potential future improvements for the intersection. And if you had any thoughts, or if that's something that you would hope to work out kind of behind the scenes, or if you need some board input, or is there a solution out there that maybe we're not capturing at this point?
I can probably speak to that. As Sean said, we did meet with the design team, and the applicant talked about the offsite with our traffic engineers, Mullen Broom and Bill Bray, and kind of walked through that. The problem is, we are hopeful to get it out on the street to bid our design work, our project in the intersection. And so we have designed it. It started prior to this applicant coming forward with the design. And so with that, we're trying to move forward, and obviously it takes time, maybe a little more time probably on the public sector than it would on a private sector project. But with that said, we also put it out to bid in a way that we look at getting the best price. So for my point of view as town staff, we're looking at it as not restricting a contractor to necessarily try to get it done this calendar year. If we put it, our hope is to put it out the end of this summer or early fall, and giving them a window to perhaps start in the spring or summer to give them next construction season, I'm hopeful will give us a lower price. And so obviously that gives, is a hiccup for the applicant. And we did talk about the jog a little bit, which in both scenarios, as Sean said, there would still be a jog. We can appreciate that. And so we did talk, as he mentioned, about asking, and I have had follow-up conversations, just so you're aware, Sean and Tanya, I've had follow-up conversations with our traffic engineer about trying to push maybe that intersection a little bit. I mean, it would be a matter of maybe 5 feet, 4 feet, something like that, but any little bit will help as you're kind of coming through that intersection. So we are trying to help what we can on our side of it, and looking at trying to inch that intersection over without having to spend more town money to try to accommodate that. I guess there's a very fine line where trying to move it as much as we can without incurring more costs and redoing some of the other radii. So we're trying to work with the applicant when we can, but that said, adding that left turn lane in Saco Street is going to have to be accommodated with some tapers to get back to the intersection. So I think that's going to happen regardless. And so, yes, there's some working out on timing, but I guess I can't predict our timing. And I think that's really unfortunate in this case, but I'm not sure where staff can kind of help with that, unfortunately, or where the board could. I'm not really sure what direction the applicant would be looking for from the board.
Okay. Thanks, Angela. I think that helps a little. So the big takeaway there is we're doing our best on our side of it. And hopefully we can get it to work for the applicant as well. Is that kind of the gist?
I think it will work either way, whether we come first or they come first. It's a matter of, I know, making that bend as less a bend as possible for safety reasons. And maybe Jen could speak to that, probably knowing more of traffic and roadway design. But anything we can kind of take out of that, kind of the curse of that bend, is going to be helpful. And so that's what we're going to try to do. But obviously, when you introduce a left turn lane, you're going to have to work around and have that situation.
Sure. And then maybe this is also for staff, but I kind of want to get back to the stormwater aspect of this. And just so we know as a board, I know you said you just want us to have a level of comfort with this more than anything. So we did have an approved plan previously with stormwater drainage, and I understand this plan is different and it's got a different, amount of impervious surface and whatnot. Is the big difference here the use of the pervious pavement and what it will do for the stormwater numbers, or is it I guess my question is, how does this differ from what was previously approved as far as stormwater control goes?
The reason staff is bringing it up at all, I think, is because it was part of your original conversations for this site, because really there is no outlet. You're infiltrating. And I know it was brought up by at least one, if not more, board members about idling traffic, what is coming off the pavement, and then infiltrating into the groundwater. This is more of, I guess, a direct line to that. And however, as Sean had mentioned, it obviously does have a filter media that just needs to be maintained and make sure that I guess it's a heightened maintenance. I just want to make sure that's clear, because this is an aquifer protection district. And like I said, because it was discussed in the previous board meetings with, as Sean had said, a different design, I just want to make sure the board is comfortable with this design. And I'll let the board members probably that spoke to that speak to that a little more. And like I said, and maybe it's a matter of, I think we've talked about in the past with this site about heightening that maintenance responsibility and maybe making sure that the applicant is aware and the maintenance requirements are very well known, and how we have to keep that as functioning as possible. I mean, it's obviously going to function, but to keep that as clean as possible so you don't get those down in especially such a sensitive area as the aquifer protection overlay.
Thanks, Angela. So I'm going to quickly ask Robin to weigh in a little bit on that, just because I know that's definitely your wheelhouse. And what level of comfort, or what level of measures, perhaps I should say, would be, do you think this board should be requiring or asking the applicant to provide over and above maybe what they're already doing, if you feel that's necessary? Or maybe you could weigh in with whether or not you feel it's adequate, as Angela said, with kind of a heightened sense of maintenance involved.
Yeah, Nick, it was my understanding that the last applicant who did go through the approval process not only had underground storage and an underdrain in their infiltration, but they also put an impermeable liner in. And I think that here is the difference with idling traffic and leaking vehicles and porous pavement. And it's in combination with a really robust winter maintenance procedure, meaning you obviously can't put sand down on a porous pavement area without a vacuum cleaner. You basically need a street sweeper that will vacuum up the sand. So if sand is out, then you have to use salt. And where's the salt going to go? It's going to go right through the infiltration system and outlet to groundwater. And without the appropriate pollutant removal, then we're going to potentially have a violation of a groundwater quality standard. And that's required right in Chapter 500. And whether or not, the full Chapter 500 applies or not, the Appendix D still is stated here in the Aquifer Protection Overlay District. And what Appendix D of Chapter 500 requires is this notice to the DEP that they could be polluting the groundwater system. and they need to get a waste discharge license with DEP in this case. And the way around that before was having that impervious liner to basically block out any conduit to the groundwater. So that's my understanding of the difference, and I think it still applies here.
So for your level of comfort, you would prefer to see an impervious liner system kind of involved here. Sean, had you looked at that aspect of this at all?
So I'm assuming what Robin's referring to is for the liner was intended to be lined under drain soil filters or lined bioretention cells. Although when I looked at the plans that I have for the daycare that was approved, it didn't call for a liner. So I don't know if I don't have a final set. But either way, if those were lined, so the water was then collected in the under drain, and then it was transported to the underground detention chamber system. That chamber system then infiltrated into the ground. So on one hand, there was a liner system in the bioretention cell, but then the water was just brought to a different area of the site where it infiltrated. So we haven't looked at, because I'm not aware of any system where you would put a liner under a pervious pavement buildup, because it sort of defeats the purpose of the pervious pavement buildup. But either way, however you're moving the water around from the site, eventually it's going to infiltrate into the ground. So it's a different design, but ultimately the water is infiltrating. We have looked at options for, as far as for a more robust maintenance issue with, like, as Robin mentioned, you don't use sand on pervious pavement because it clogs the pavement. So then you're looking at a direct, more ice melt area product. So there are products available that are more environmentally friendly than using just salt or calcium chloride. And the applicant has looked into that and found, I think there was 2 or 3 contractors in the area that do winter maintenance that provide that service for a product that you can use to beef up that sort of maintenance plan, if you will. But as far as have we looked into putting a liner under the pervious pavement? No, because like I said, we would essentially just be sort of delaying the aspect of the water infiltrating into the ground.
Angela?
I guess I just wanted to, confirm a few things and clarify others for the planning board. And if I start to go astray, the planners can stop me if I'm not supposed to talk another project. But the board recently had a porous pavement project in front of it. And with that, DEP actually required it to be lined because it was in a watershed that was threatened, and chlorides was the issue. So this, I guess I would look at similarly in that respect. However, I guess I will also confirm to counter that, Sean's point of it was true that the other systems were lined, and then so they went through different medias, were filtered and then piped to a point like he was mentioning where it was kind of removed at the far corner of the site and it was infiltrating at that point. I know it was a topic of conversation with the board because that is a direct connection into the groundwater. And so it was discussed at the time, and that really there was not really a whole lot of alternatives for the site. So we talked about beefing up really the things around it. I will also, going back to that previous application that a recent application the board has approved with porous pavement, we actually had a maintenance, a winter maintenance agreement that the applicant worked on with staff to really reduce the amount of salt application on the site. Would actually had a condition talking about as part of their stormwater annual review process, is providing how much material actually went down on the site. So you could talk, because the whole point of that was saying we're going to use less, because you really do on these porous pavement sites. You end up, the thought is you end up using less salt because you don't really need it. If you look at some of the sites around town, Martin's Point is a good one. You can see where the porous pavement is as opposed to the regular pavement, because the snow just disappears, the water just goes down through, and you don't really need to put salt or sand on it because that's how it functions. So the problem though is that a winter contractor comes in and they get paid per the ton of salt they use per year. So it's in their incentive to put more material down, whether it's needed or not. And so that's where the town is really kind of trying to focus on some of these porous pavement sites to look at ways that we can incentivize, instead of using materials, incentivize not using material. So that really comes down to the owner putting in their contract that it's not going to be paying that per tonnage kind of use, which is going to help, I think, all of us. It will help the applicant by not paying more for the material usage. It helps the town because we're not contaminating the groundwater in our aquifer protection area. So that was our solution for getting around what Sean is trying to figure out, is how you in a sensitive watershed, how you deal with porous pavement. And I think the board has tackled it and has come out with a really good solution. I'm pretty excited about trying to track some of these sites and maybe be a model for other communities on how to do that.
Angela, I'm wondering too, if the discharge location from the past application that we approved, was there discharge location to the MS4 system? So it was virtually like a connection to the town's roadway ditch? No?
No, it was in the far back corner. And so, yeah.
Got it. Okay, I was thinking that it was sort of almost like commingling the outlet with the town's MS4 drainage system or ditch.
It was up in this portion of the site.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
May I speak? Just as I have spent a lot of time now researching, because I know that this is a really sensitive area. Boy, I thought I was really doing well here because I've had a level lot. Who knew that a level lot could ever be such a pain in the butt? But you know, there's no good way to get rid of the runoff, the stormwater, any of that, because it is such a flat site, and really the only way really to make sure that none of the water gets down into the aquifer is to have a completely lined system. And the cost of that is it's beyond what any small business could afford to do. It would just basically render this property undevelopable if it were required that any runoff and any stormwater had to be actually just removed and was not able to get down into the aquifer. But knowing that obviously groundwater is a major concern, we want to keep it as we want to keep our water here in Maine as clean as possible. I have reached out to 2 local landscaping and winter maintenance contractors, both of which are actually local Scarborough businesses, and they are using a product now called Magic Salt, which is it is the most environmentally friendly material on the market, and will guaranteed use up to 50% less sodium than traditional salt and sand. And the conversations that I've had with them, they're both, because they're local Scarborough businesses and they know the area very well, and they know the town very well. So they are prepared to enter into a contract with me that will basically, they will make more money by using less. They realize, and because there are two of them, they know that there is some competition there. So they both are vying for the business and have pledged to give me a contract that will ensure that there is less product used. And as Angela mentioned, this porous pavement, it really lends itself to the elements. So we are absolutely doing our best to make sure that we are protecting the aquifer.
Thanks, Tanya. Okay, so I'm going to just turn it over now to general questions from the board. Rachel, do you want to start off?
There we go. Now I'm unmuted. I've listened with a great deal of fascination and not confusion, but concern in that we have a good business here that's making every effort to accommodate our design standards and our wastewater standards. And we have a lot that is not cooperative, I guess I would say. I think at some point we're going to get to the point where we're going to have to say, what's the best we can do given what we know now, and hope that at some point something comes along that is within the realm of the financial capacity of the business to add whatever is new. I appreciate you're looking at some of the two of the landscapers or folks, contractors in Scarborough, and getting them to bid against each other. And I need my driveway plowed, so I may talk to you to see if I can get a couple of them bidding against each other for this coming winter. We're up against some things that just there's not really any good answer to. And what we may end up doing and may decide is best is to go with the best design that all of the minds in the room can come up with, so that we also get a business in town that is going to be valued and contribute to the town. I don't pretend to understand all of the issues that's going on with the road. I tried to do that. I think we have creative people in the town, and I think we have a creative person in Sean, and I am very hopeful that those creative people, Angela and Sean and other folks, can really work together to come out with a good solution and a way to make the road changes work. I actually trust that they will be able to do that. We have a site that we can't change the site. And it's not a site that's going to remain vacant because it's flat. People are going to constantly come back to us and say, this is a great site, we want to try something. Well, we've got a company that is willing to work as much as possible with us, and I'm very appreciative of the work they're doing. And I know we're not voting on anything tonight, but I think we need to continue to work with these folks to get the best we can, and then say, this is the best we can do, and they need to go forward.
Thanks, Rachel. Roger? Roger, you're on mute.
Okay. I tend to agree with Rachel in terms of the stormwater issue. Let the experts work that out and come up with the best possible solution to this site. It is a challenging site. I do want to commend the applicant for trying to develop this business. I really hope they can do it. I do have a question for Angela though regarding the intersection and the road work. When I'm looking at that C101, and I'm looking at the orange areas, I think it's orange. That's the town, that's the work that the town's going to be doing. Is that correct?
Is Sean bring it up? But I guess I'll have to wait for him to bring the plan up.
Well, let me tell you what my question is. Assuming that the orange is,
okay.
Yeah, the orange there, that's the work that the town has to do, correct? Now, when I look down Saco Street, I see continuous red lines. Is that town work as well, or that's just using an orange line? You see these?
No, we would stop.
that
You
go-
can see there's
that go
actually
through
a
the blue
line
area?
that says CES design. Yep, there's a line on the plan that shows town design and then CES design.
Right,
So
you
the
see the-
blue is all,
So these additional lines are just to demarcate the lane striping or how
Okay,
that would
okay.
look.
Okay, so. the reason I
so our
asked that is-
project ends there.
Okay, the reason I asked that is because what I heard before was, or I think it was implied that until the intersection got corrected, the blue area could not be finalized. And I was wondering if the blue area was finalized without the intersection being totally corrected.
So our work, as it shows here, we were tying into the existing line work, so the existing travel ways. So we were tying back into what was there. When they come through and add a left turn lane into their site, it shifts them over. So then they are also trying to hit that same line because we're kind of coming at it from both sides to hit that point that Sean just pointed out. And so as they had mentioned, in order to kind of keep that angle as large as possible, so we don't have a tight change in direction, it would help them if we kind of shifted our intersection.
Angela,
You know what I'm saying, Reg?
I guess my question is, though, can anything be done on the CES portion without the intersection being improved? Because it seems to me that that's going to take a while to get that intersection improved.
But the point where that line is an existing point. So where he's showing CES design and the town design, we're both hitting that same point. So that's an existing. So they could move forward before our intersection improvements. I guess that is the point. It's
Okay,
just a
that's what
matter of where that point is.
Okay, that was my question, because I thought I understood that it would be impossible for them to move forward without the intersection being corrected. So I guess that's not true. I misunderstood that.
well, if I can explain, we could move forward, but it's not going to fix the shift in the road that was suggested in the memo. We can't fix that shift without the design being shifted. So at the intersection.
And Roger, just so it's clear, because maybe I'm just inferring from a comment you made, but the funds have already been approved by town council actually to do this project using our traffic impact fees. So the town is, as Angela said, the plans are just about ready to go out for bid, and this could be a project that, this project will be done, barring some other crazy thing that happens in 2021, but let's hope we get above and beyond where we're at. The expectation is this will be done within the next year or so, the town's project. So I just want to be sure we're sort of clear on that point. That was
How
all
does
I
it
wanted to
fit,
say.
how does that fit within the timeline of the applicant?
Well, the applicant would like to move forward with construction on the site this year.
Okay,
So that's when it, I guess, becomes an issue, and I guess a discussion with if it's possible to whether we do the offsite improvements the way it's shown and leave that shift the way it is, or can we delay the offsite improvements but still move forward with our on-site work to do the offsite improvements more in line with the town's project? I don't know. I think that's, I guess, sort of the discussion points to have is how that could work to make everything so ultimately you have a product that everybody's happy with and it's not sort of just mashed together. Angela, I had a question. It was our understanding that as part of your phase 2 improvements of the intersection, that left turn lane was going to get extended anyways. So I think even then you'd have this same shift problem. And I don't know, I think what's forcing it more is the sidewalk, leaving room for a sidewalk, which I don't know, maybe that wasn't thought of as part of the design originally because you weren't going to build it yet, but I don't know but I think our left turn lane is something that it's probably longer than what the town was originally going to build, but there was going to be a left turn lane extension as part of phase 2. It's what we understood.
Yeah, and I think, as you said, it's phase 2 is, I would say, a concept. So I think we were always intending, as you said, to have a sidewalk. We're always intending to eventually, because of the capacity of this intersection, most likely extend that left turn lane just because of the queuing that we're seeing out there. But this project, from the town's point of view, is really focusing at the moment on phase 1 because our hope is at some point we get the east-west bypass, and that's really where it, from our project's point of view, is trying to keep this as minimal as possible as far as capacity. We don't want to blow out this intersection because realistically we could go in there and put 6 lanes and really get the capacity we need for a 20-minute window in the morning and a 20-minute window in the evening. If you ever drive through there, it's just a crazy amount of volume in a very short amount of time. And so it was really about kind of keeping this as small a project, but efficient, to try to make this intersection as efficient as possible without, as we said, continuing to keep adding lanes throughout there. So we really were looking at, yes, doing future phases. And so really laying those out as concept. And so, yes, part of that would be adding an extension of that left turn lane. But really the hope is to try to, I guess it didn't at the time have all the details that you're talking about. How would that work with the sidewalk and the lanes and all of that? That hasn't been kind of worked out because I think the town is also hoping that eventually MTA figures out how to make this all work and that we're not adding all this traffic through this small neighborhood, which is what they're seeing now.
I think
I could quickly chime in here. As you know, given that we have some time, they don't have a traffic movement permit. Is this something that the applicant and staff is willing to continue to try to work through behind the scenes prior to the next application, to the best of their abilities, at least?
Yeah, I think so. I think we'd be more looking for. The important thing is, I think, to get to a point where we could have, if we're still waiting for DOT to have essentially conditional approval on getting a DOT traffic movement permit issued, and that it's not a matter of just working with staff to figure out what the best solution is for this lane configuration. That's fine, but we'd like to resolve or at least know that we've addressed any concerns with the site, and once we address DOT's comments, that it's sort of a rubber stamp type issue to come back with you to get our final approval.
Yeah, I just didn't want to try to engineer this during
No, no.
Mhm.
So,
And the
All right.
DOT will have to approve the offsites as well as part of their TMP process. So still needs to be figured out on their end as well. Just to point that out.
thanks, Jamel. Roger, to get some more.
Well, the only other quick thing I would say is regarding the windows that were mentioned in the staff reports. I understand completely the building design. In the building design, the exterior design is predicated on the interior needs as far as I can see. So and I'm looking at the one of your pages here, and which shows look at the building from County Road, and I think it looks fine the way it is, so I wouldn't really press that. I mean, there's bigger issues like we got to deal with right here now, I think, unfortunately. So I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Roger. Jennifer?
Just a couple clarifying questions. On the same graphic that we're looking at right now, it's unclear who's doing the full depth road work. Is that town work or applicant work? The widening to the
Everything essentially to the, well, it's actually to the north, I guess, but to the left of this line is applicant work.
Got it.
And this little sliver right here is, so again, this is anticipating this intersection work that widens the road a little bit here. We were matching into it with this little sliver here. If we're beforehand, then that gets to be somehow that tapers in and has to be fixed later.
Mm-hmm. Okay. One thing that would be helpful on this graphic in future submissions for me anyway would be to call out the length, the total left turn length. You have it broken up into a couple of different pieces, but not the whole left turn queue storage length there isn't called out. And I only bring that up because it was described in our traffic peer reviewers comments. And so it would be helpful to compare those two. I understand that a lot of people have sat down and probably talked a lot about this, but just at face value, if the analyses show that this left turn lane is going to queue up from the signal past this driveway, particularly in the morning, which is when, I've got to believe when this site would be in the highest demand. I just feel like that would be difficult for everybody. It's certainly not conducive to your business if people can't get in and or can't get out, but also would have an impact on the capacity and through movement for the intersection. I don't have a great answer to that. There's, like Angela said, there's a lot of people coming through here, in a short period of time. And it is a short period of time, so people shouldn't expect to have to deal with that constantly. But if this was my business, I would, and I'm sure you're aware of that. But that's just something that definitely jumped out at me here in terms of the comments about the queue length and storage in that lane. In terms of alignment, they don't really like it, but DOT has been known to allow 10-foot lanes in certain cases, or you could talk about a 10.5-foot lane maybe if they're looking at this, just to try and eke out a little bit more width in this cross section at the between here and the signal. But yeah, I agree. It does sort of seem like the right of way, the available right of way is kind of out of balance. And I think this is what Angela was talking about. So trying not to go entirely back to the drawing board, but gosh, it certainly does look like there's some space there to the east, just outside of that intersection, where if that approach could be realigned a little bit, and it may not line up perfectly with the opposite approach, but it would certainly help alleviate some of that really awkward swooping geometry. And typically what happens when that, you know, if you were to paint this out there right now, people are just gonna tend to drive in a straight line, and it's gonna wear that yellow line off very quickly. And you'd be in a situation where, particularly in the winter and the other half of the year when our pavement markings are hard to see, you know, could be a safety concern. But again, I know that there's others looking at this, so I won't belabor that point too much. What other comments do I have? Oh, am I interpreting this correctly in that the applicant is proposing to fully pave this area that's in blue also?
That's correct.
Yeah, okay, after the widening. Okay, great, because that's when you want to paint it, after that, not before. So, you know, just another last plug for patience, and, you know, the town's in a kind of a sticky spot here in terms of trying to get this work done, I'm sure, and not hold up this project, but also taking advantage of, you know, the spot in the calendar in terms of getting a contractor on board to do this work. That's a challenge for a lot of, not special here for sure. And the only other question I had about was actually about the windows proposed as well. In some of the renderings, so while you were giving your presentation, you were talking about proposed windows, that there had been comments about windows, and that this building is sort of a stock building. I was just curious if are the windows shown here part of the stock building proposal, or are these in response to board comments asking for additional windows or false windows even?
Oh, so this is the sort of the standard model for Aroma Joe's. Has a few different model stores, and this is the model that they've chosen for this site, and that's the placement of the windows on here are standard for this model.
And is that the model that you were originally proposing, or are you now proposing this model because it includes those windows?
No, this is what we've
all along
proposed from the start.
Great, thank you for clarifying that. That's all I have. Keep it up. This is a tricky one for sure.
Thanks, Jennifer. Robin.
Yeah, so I have a couple ideas. And I applaud the applicant for all the creativity that their team has been putting into this, by looking at new products, whether it's Magic Salt, which Magic Salt is still got the chlorides in it that goes into the groundwater. It just does it at a slower rate, kind of a thing. So a couple ideas might be to meet with DEP and see if they can give you a de minimis finding once you develop a winter maintenance plan, Sean, to sort of reduce the amount of well, once you give them your winter maintenance plan, like Angela was saying, and you can talk about how much you've reduced your salt applications and the like, and determine what your sort of loading might be. DEP can give you a de minimis finding and or give you a waste discharge license. That's not to say that they may require you to monitor water levels or water quality for long-term kind of thing. But that is something that at least the town can hang their hat on, kind of a thing, to sort of take it off Angela's shoulders or Jamel and Jay's shoulders, kind of thing. So there's that. The other thing that I guess I want to sort of go back to, I know, Sean, you had mentioned that you thought the parking space discussion was already finalized, but is that something that we need to vote on tonight? Because I know, Sean, you were talking about, like, if we go talk to DMT and we dot all our I's and cross all our T's, we want just like a rubber stamp when we come back. So I guess that's what I'm looking at is, have we vetted the whole 5 parking space issues or not? Because Sean's memory is that we have, and our memory may not be that it is, kind of thing. So I guess.
Jump in if you want, Robin.
What's that?
You could jump in if you want.
Please, thank you.
I think that they had to redesign the spaces, if I'm
Okay.
not mistaken, just to be a little wider to be in compliance. So I guess it'd just be good for the board to provide some sort of direction on that, since it's below the requirements.
Yeah, because the ordinance is requiring 10 spaces, but they're providing 5 right now with the space for 5 future spaces, kind of thing.
Correct.
So, I don't know, Sean, do you want to go down this road? Do you want to try to close this loop tonight, or do you want to come back to the planning board?
I would like to close as many loops as possible tonight, so all questions are answered and that's as
Yeah.
minimal outstanding things as possible.
Right. How did I know that? Excellent. Yeah. So how are you proposing to handle that right now, Sean? The
So-
5 spaces?
So we believe 5 spaces is all that's needed for this use. The ordinance says we need to have 10. So we're proposing to build 5. We're showing where we could build 5 additional spaces if at some point it's determined that our parking is inadequate for the use and we need to add more spaces. So there's obviously room to do that. But there's no sense, I guess, in putting more pavement out there when we're talking about polluting the groundwater, and we're just talking about building spaces that won't get used. So
Yeah. And so my question to you is, why porous pavement? Was that one of the only BMPs that would get you what is it in the aquifer protection overlay, 90% treatment kind of thing, Sean? Why the 90%? Why porous pavement?
So we needed to do some sort of treatment measure. As we talked about, there was no way to have an underdrain, any sort of an underdrain system, because we can't daylight the underdrain. So at that point, rather than trying to build the site up where we could have something that was underdrained, it was cheaper to go with an option of using the porous pavement buildup, knowing that the water is going to end up infiltrating into the ground eventually in either design.
Yeah, so has your design as it is now accounted for the pervious pavement of those additional 5 spaces? Assuming they need to be built in a year. Just let's say
I guess the design as far as what, I don't believe we had to do a pre and post calculation as far as adding additional. So the grading is there for it. If they were to build them in the future, they would build it the same as what our build up for the rest of the pervious pavement on the site.
I'm sorry, my understanding was that you still need to treat a certain percentage of your impervious area under the aquifer protection.
Yes, so
overlay.
we need to treat it. So if we were to add those spaces in, they would be constructed just like the rest of the site is constructed. So the pervious pavement provides, it's essentially self-treating. If you're pervious pavement, you're treating that area. Does that make sense?
It does, but I'm still, it's the pervious pavement doesn't necessarily treat the salt. You're just saying it's an accepted BMP.
It's a BMP that's
Okay.
DEP is established as a
Got
BMP for stormwater treatment.
Got it. And so what you're saying is when you build it, it will automatically be incorporated into the porous pavement? I mean, that seems like, it's my understanding that when you build porous pavement, you've got to really notify the concrete batching plant ahead of time. And so building those 5 spaces as porous pavement might be cost prohibitive to the client.
Yeah, I guess potentially it could be, but I guess I would go back to not cost prohibitive, but could be more expensive than if you were doing the whole site. But I'd go back to the idea that out of all the Aroma Joes and Aroma Joe's history on these types of sites, they have a pretty good understanding of what they need for parking spaces. And 5 spaces is adequate.
Right, and I just ask you to go any of the Starbucks and to any of the Dunkin' Donuts that we have in this town, and they're just, you know, flowing out into regular traffic. So
Yeah.
I just ask that you meet us where we are, that we need 10 spaces, and understand that there could be a nexus issue when it comes to building those 5 spaces as porous pavement.
Yeah, I guess you mentioned those other ones, but the difference here is this is strictly drive-through other than the walk-up window, which
some people may drive to and park to. So I really feel like 10 spaces is what we need. And so I'm thinking that we may as well just build them at the same time, considering all the, you know, the red tape you have to go through to build porous pavement. So that's where I stand on that, Mr. Chair. I don't know if you want others to weigh in on this so that we can provide the applicant with a clear path forward for final approval at a later date.
Yeah, I think yeah, the board members should weigh in on this. Real quick though, I do want to see if Rick and Rick have anything quickly that they need clarified. But Rick Meinking, do you have anything outside of what we've already kind of addressed here?
No, not at all. Just, I know you're going to provide the cut sheets for the lighting, but maybe encourage you to take a look at those E fixtures that you have. It looks like you're specifying halogen fixtures, and maybe an LED would do the same thing on just those E fixtures, which is on the south facing down lights there on that side of the building. Other than that, I think things are moving along and progressing well. Thanks.
Thanks, Rick. Rick Duperi, are you?
I'm actually an abutter to this project, so I recused myself in the past. So I'm going to do the same thing again tonight.
Yes,
so
thank
I don't have anything.
Forgot about that. Thank you, Rick. Okay, so I think Robin had a fair question. We should probably each weigh in on the parking spots real quick, just to give them some clarity. Roger?
Yes, question to the applicant. On other Aroma Joes, do they have just 5 parking lots?
So on the drive-through only, similar like models to what we're proposing here, that is sufficient parking. They have other stores that, I mean, some of their sites have indoor seating and counters, and those obviously have more parking, or some of them are retrofitted other uses which already had more parking. But to go to a new site like this, then yes, that's sufficient parking. And I believe for the similar site that we did on Bridges Drive when we were here, and maybe this is, I was confusing this. Last time we were at the planning board, we had both of those projects. So I'm pretty sure one of them, it was the same situation and you waived the need for the full 10 spaces.
I guess I understand where Robin's going on this, but to me, if their business model basically calls for just 5 spaces, and that seems to have satisfied their business model, I'm not sure requiring them to show the other 5 spaces simply because that's what our ordinance calls for. I guess I don't agree with that.
Can I jump in here for just a second? I've got Ashley Sidney, who is the development manager for Aroma Joe's Corporate, on the line here. She has indicated to me that 85% of Aroma Joe's business is through the drive-through, and that is on the high side. Many of the locations have fewer than have less than that. Less than 15% walk up. So Aroma Joe's is a business that's been in operation for 20 years now, and we've shown that 5 spots is adequate for the business needs, including a walk-up window.
Thank you, Tanya. Rick Manking. You're muted, Rick.
Yeah, sorry about that. I was just looking at the satellite from the Aroma Joe's and Saco, and it only has 4 spaces, and it appears to have the same footprint of the building. Maybe it's even a little bit bigger. But at any rate, just for FYI, they have 4 parking spots.
Thanks. Rachel, do you want to weigh in on the parking spots?
Yeah, I'm comfortable with 5. I think the business knows what it needs. As long as we have the potential for the other 5 and the business is willing to take whatever hit that it might have to take if it has to put them in later. I don't think they're going to see that grand a walk up from the parking lot. Perhaps from the street, if there's more development on that lot, they would get a walk up from the lot, but I don't see people driving in and choosing to park and then walking in. So 5 works for me.
Thanks, Rachel. Jennifer?
Yeah, I agree with Rachel. I think that based on what's been presented here in terms of site use and other comparisons with other similar businesses here, if the applicant can prove to us that they're comfortable starting initially with 5 spaces, we've asked for them to carve out the additional 5 such that if there is a problem, they can meet our ordinance if it's documented that way, and that if that is where things go, it'll be their expense to do that. But if they don't need them, particularly in a sensitive watershed area, I think this is a good kind of compromise in that way.
Thanks, Jennifer. So yeah, I'll concur with that sentiment as well. I think they're okay as paper parking spots for the time being. What other items? Yes, Tanya.
Sorry, Mr. Chair.
Oh, I'm sorry, Robin. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I would just like it. Yeah, I think it can be a condition of approval that they'll work with staff to put those 5 spaces there later. But I guess I would just like that the folks to consider if those are going to be porous pavement when they get constructed because of those sort of logistical issues that I was talking about, or if they will be regular pavement. I guess my feeling is I'd like them to be porous pavement, but I get that that's going to be a more expensive for the applicant if they do come back and do them as a separate batch.
I think at this point you'd ask for the consistency. That would just be my feeling on it. Is if it was worthwhile to install it everywhere else, why not in those 5 spots? So I would agree that it would be that you'd want that consistency of porous pavement there, and including that they're probably trying to design a lot of their stormwater features around porous pavement.
And if I could, Nick, just to clarify one thing that I heard Robin talk about, wanting to be sure there's a condition of approval that if those spaces are needed, that they be built out. That's the requirement of the ordinance. That's what the ordinance allows the planning board to reduce the number of parking spaces from the required 10 to 5, provide the applicant shows where those 5 could go. And if what the ordinance says, if the code enforcement office finds that there's a need for them, then they have to be built. So that is built right into this discussion and the board's approval of it. So just want to clarify that.
And I guess we could, to your point, Robin, is I'm wondering if the applicant would be willing to put a note on the plan then that, I think to your point is they'd be built, but would it be porous pavement or would it be another method? And I guess even to do 5 spaces for them to do an under-drain soil filter or something else is going to be a big expense for 5 spaces. So they would have to provide some water quality regardless. And if it would make you feel more comfortable, I guess I could ask, it would ask the applicant if they're willing to put that as a note that on the plan, those future would be porous pavement specifically.
So Angela, as the applicant, I can tell you that I don't have any issue with that, if we do go down that road, that we have to put in the additional, I mean, I can see where the additional 5 spaces would come in if something else on the remainder of the property were built. But, you know, at that point, we would be coming back to you for changes to the design altogether, you know, but, you know, just if nothing else is ever developed on this property and there becomes a time and need for me to put in those additional 5 parking spaces, they will be done in the same fashion as the current pavement, just for the consistency of it. And because I have to have maintenance performed on this pavement, at least annually, if not twice a year, you know, just for the sake of having all of that cleaned by the same person at the same time, it would all be consistent.
Thank you. Robin, I see you have a hand raised. Is that?
I think it's from the past, Nick, but I was just wondering, are you going to talk to about the facade treatment standard?
I heard a couple members already weigh in on it. I'm currently fine with what I'm seeing based on the applicant's proposal. I get staff's point of view. I'm just not sure on a building of that size that a couple extra windows will really make the impact that one may hope. So I'm okay with what I see there. I think from the elevation, if you can get the landscaping to kind of look like what it does in those graphics, it's gonna be beautiful. So
can we just have the applicant or whoever has control put up the 3D rendering?
I've got so many PDFs open here. I'm not sure which one's which. So
Which ones are the fake windows, false windows? Sorry.
Well, so this doesn't have any, this is our original design of what we are proposing.
That was a staff suggestion, Robin.
And this
wasn't sorry, Sean.
No, I was just saying the staff was suggesting potentially something on the west side, which this is the west side that we're looking at. And then on the south side, which is the south end of the building.
So will you have no freestanding sign, just a building will say Aroma Joe's?
No, there is a freestanding sign proposed. It doesn't show on our renderings, but it is on our site plan.
Okay.
It's off to the right here on this rendering.
What watershed are we in?
Where's that map, Angela? Is this Red Brook?
I don't
think it is.
I think it is.
Think so.
Maybe not. That's my guess.
I think it is. If you go over to the.
It is Red Brook.
Yeah, I was gonna say about a mile down the road, there's actually a Red Brook sign. Yeah.
Do we have a compensation fee utilization plan for Red Brook yet?
We do.
So I'm wondering if they can't meet the standards, can they pay into it?
The issue, and maybe Sean can speak to what the permitting the reason why they're going through Chapter 500 is really because of the aquifer protection overlay. So they aren't technically, I don't believe, triggering Chapter 502, and Sean can correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's just because of the small nature of their footprint. And the only reason they're triggering the others is because our ordinance says specifically the aquifer protection.
Right, but I'm just wondering that if, because we do mention chapter 500 and appendix D and things like that, if there is that opportunity to sort of pay into the CFUP, if for some reason you can't get the de minimis finding from DEP or the waste discharge license isn't a good fit. Just a thought. And Mr. Chair, I'm done.
And just so the applicant knows, or the other board members maybe, is the town does collect in chapter 502 is the higher standard. And so if an applicant can't meet some of the higher standard, they can pay an in lieu fee. That usually goes through DEP. But since we have a plan, instead they write a check to the town of Scarborough. And so far, the collection I've received has been projects actually in South Portland who are in Red Brook. And so it basically accumulates a larger pot so that we can do a retrofit or a larger watershed project in Red Brook. So it just, of the accumulative effects, it kind of helps do one larger project than say like this, spending money, say at this specific site.
All right, so I guess my question now is for the applicant. Do you have the direction you need to come back to us?
I know we've covered a lot of the questions. I just want to take another quick look to make sure that we've addressed all of them here.
And I guess while Sean looks, I'll just jump in, and Sean could just provide the board with an update of their TMP and, what the timing is of them reviewing that. And I think that's important for the board to understand.
Yeah, so we submitted essentially the same additional information. What we did, I guess, just to back up a little bit, we prepared our design of the off-site improvements on Saco Street, met with town staff to review that plan. Based off of that review, we prepared the additional calculations that needed to be submitted to both the town and DEP, or sorry, DOT. So that information was all submitted to DOT, I want to say around 3 weeks ago, something like that. We've followed up with DOT, haven't got a response back to see where they're at in their review. They had indicated that they were going to jump right on it when we got it to them, but we haven't heard from them with any questions or comments. So that's where we're at. We're trying to push them as fast as we can, as politely as we can, but we're a little bit at their mercy. So on the list here, I guess one of the other comments was regarding curbing to close off the driveway to the existing house. We're suggesting some sort of more temporary barrier, and rather than curb. So I guess I like the board's thoughts one way or the other on that.
Can I just ask real quick, what's the general opposition to the granite curbing?
Well, the only thought is we don't know what's going to happen with this house. Say they decided to use it as a single family house rental, renovate it, or some other use. Without further development on the lot, the only real access to it is through that existing driveway. So I guess to install curbing, which is a more permanent type solution at this point, and then if they were to use that house for something and then to have to take that curbing back out.
Sean, let me jump in there. There's no curbing on that road. As Rick Dupere lives next door. Rick, you can feel free to jump in. It's just gravel. It just runs off. So you would be putting curbing where there is none on any of the, along that stretch of road.
So I
This
guess
is Rick.
the only reason
that
I
is true.
brought it up, that's a little, as an area of concern. I mean, if a car goes off the road and hits some curbing, okay, car goes off the road, hits a boulder, could be a different outcome. That was my only thought. So
We can set those back away from the road a
Yeah,
little.
it would be set back off the road quite a bit, just to prevent people from, it was Angela at one of the earlier meetings had mentioned that if we didn't cut that off, that people would be cutting across to avoid that intersection. And I agree, that's not how we want. For one thing, they'd be going right over my septic, and that would be a very costly issue. So we definitely want to put some sort of barrier. And I'd like for it to be somewhat pleasant to look at. I realize that the existing house is an eyesore at this point. So I'd like to put something in there that doesn't continue to create more of an eyesore, but that also isn't going to restrict future development.
Any other thoughts from board members on that? I mean, I'm not wed to a curb. I'm okay with a boulder. Can it be of the smaller variety that doesn't kill people? That would be fantastic. Rachel.
Yeah, boulders fine with me, and just in terms of the windows, I think the design is fine. I understand, the desire to have more windows, but given what they've said, they would be fake windows to begin with, and I'm kind of opposed to those. I know we've had them in some buildings, but I don't think we need it here.
Thanks. Jennifer or Robin, any thoughts on boulders?
I actually think it's a good idea, given that there are proposed, otherwise boulders proposed to kind of cordon off that septic field from the rest of the parking area. So I think a consistent material would make some sense, particularly if it's set back off the road, maybe at the right-of-way line or somewhere around there.
Yeah, I agree. Set back a little bit from traffic. I think it makes good sense. And I'd like to just yield to Roger Bealey, who's had his hand up.
That's the problem with the panel. How you doing? Hey, Roger.
I think Nick's ignoring me. He gave me 2 chances earlier.
It's the panel view. It is not intentional. It's the panel view I've got going on here.
I just wanted to, as I recall, when we were dealing with the daycare, a couple of things. I think at one point there was discussions about having access to County Road, and we decided that we didn't want them to do that. Have a curb cut there. So I may be mistaken there, but I think that I seem to recall that. And the other thing is, on that farmhouse, as I recall, nobody wants it. The Historic Society doesn't want it. Nobody wants it. So I don't know. Maybe it's costly to get rid of it. I'd contact the fire department and see if they want to practice. But I just wanted to weigh in on that, because I don't know why if there's no curb cut there now, or there's a driveway, I guess, right? But
So there is a gravel driveway, but I guess I just want to be a little bit clear. I wouldn't necessarily characterize it as the historic committee doesn't want the house. They were certainly interested in preservation, because it is one of the listed structures within our zoning ordinance. It was a matter of with that project, there was
they couldn't get anybody to take it away, I think.
Correct, right. So I guess I just, I think characterizing it as the historic committee didn't want the house. I just wanted to be sure it was clear that they were very much interested in trying to preserve it where possible, but they do understand that, development of this property is going to happen. And if it's not feasible to incorporate the house, then that's how they came. There was another solution to that issue. So
I think, yeah, if my memory serves, we asked the previous applicant to advertise it for 30 days. And if they couldn't get rid of it, then they were going to do what they were going to do. I think I don't know if they went through that process, but I think that was the solution we came up with.
They
And I'm
did,
not
and
quite-
they did, Nick. I've got the receipt.
Yeah.
It having been advertised in the Portland Press Herald for 30 days. So it has met that requirement, but I've actually had contractors go through that house. And despite it looking like a nightmare on Elm Street from the outside, it's actually in pretty good shape on the inside. So it definitely, with the right person, it could be rehabbed. So, you know, at this point, there's no plans to do anything with it, but I would be more, since it is a historic site, I'd be more apt to see it restored than to have it demolished, just because it's an important site for the town of Scarborough.
Thank you. All right, so we have boulders. Any other outstanding issues for the applicant here? We need to tie up. Anyone have their hand raised that I'm not seeing?
I believe that was it on the list. So I don't know if you're thinking of some sort of like formal vote on those items, or just so we don't have to revisit them later. But I think we've addressed all the other questions and comments that I had.
I'm not positive we need a formal vote. I do not want to rehash it all again. And I think staff notes, I think would be sure to, they wouldn't be included in the next round of staff notes. Is that correct, Jamel?
Yeah, I'm taking pretty good notes. The best I can at 10 p.m.
And I'm going to say that I think most of us will not forget this. So
I guess one last item that we hadn't really discussed at all that I think was in some of the original staff comments was in relation to the sign. I know we need to give more detailed information on the sign. I think more looking for a formal submission with dimensions and such, but this is generally what's proposed for the sign. It has two different looks. So it has this white background during the day and then it turns dark at night.
What's the height on that?
That I do not know. There's no dimensions on this. So I think that's part of what we need to get resubmitted to the town is a more detailed sign plan.
Exactly.
But I think there was some question about how it was going to be lit and what it was going to look like. So we do have at least that piece of it to show, but we need to get you more information. But if there's any feedback, I guess, on the actual look or appearance of the sign, that would be great.
It's a good looking sign.
And Sean, as you prepare your submission next time, we can touch base. Maybe I can loop in our zoning administrator who reviews the sign permits. We can nail it down before your next submission.
Yeah, and I think the sign company probably has a lot of that information. They said they're pretty familiar with Scarborough, but I think this was a last minute thing that they didn't get all the detail on this one.
Located in Scarborough. Trying to use as many local businesses as possible. One other thing that I will point out, honestly, the easiest part of this entire project, and I can't believe any part of it has been easy, but the staff had requested that I get a new address for the business since it will be entered in, the entrance and egress will be off of Saco Street. So literally that was done in 10 minutes. It is 25 Saco Street. So that part has been done.
We all deserve a win every now and again, right?
Oh my gosh. I'd like a lot more, please.
You're almost there. All right. So that said, are we about to wrap this one up, you guys? Think we're good?
Yeah, I'd just like to thank the applicant for being extremely creative and for using Scarborough businesses and working with us. And we've been through this site so many times, and it'll really be a win for everyone to see this corner be redeveloped. And thank you so much for that.
Yeah, I think that summed it up. That's right. You've been great through the process. We know it hasn't been easy. So, but stick with it. You're almost there. All right.
Thank you.
Thanks. Have a great night.
Thanks, everybody. Unfortunately, I do show us past the 10 p.m. hour.
It means we are going to have to continue our table, continue this meeting for the next one. Table items 12 through 18. We are getting busier and busier, and you know, as we go through this, I think I'll just say this, that I think there are definitely we went through a lot of material tonight again, with some efficiency. I think as we see our agendas continue to fill up, and that we should try to search for ways that we can probably be more efficient. And I'm not 100% sure on how we can accomplish that. I try, but some of these projects are just complicated, and that's the bottom line. And we can't wave a magic wand and make them less complicated sometimes. So, but I think, you know, I think all of us can work, as well as the applicants that come before us, on trying to be very succinct and direct, and making sure that we get the most out of the time we can spend with the applicants, and also try to deal with them efficiently. So those are my thoughts. We're trying our best for anyone out there watching. Just there's a lot going on in this town, and I think 7 years ago when I first started on here, I was hearing Susan August say, you know, all the good lots in Scarborough have been developed. So that tells you what we've been going through the last few years. They just get trickier and trickier. That said, I'm gonna do a staff report real quick, Jamel and Jay.
Sure, I'll start. So I think that's actually a pretty good transition staff's been thinking about. I think we have a few items for workshop potential coming up. And so we just want to plant the seed with board members about holding a workshop to maybe talk about some of what you were just talking about, Nick, would be one thing we could potentially talk about. But for those, also for those that had the opportunity to see it'll come to me, sorry, the council workshop, I believe it was just last week with the Downs, there was some discussion about some processes that the planning board might look at. And so I think it'd be a good opportunity for the board to start that conversation. I think Long Range Planning Committee has had some conversations around some concepts. So anyway, a couple of things on the radar. So we know, you know, in addition to your meeting every 3 weeks, as well as the joint hearing that we're having with town council, I believe next Wednesday, if I have it right, September 2nd. Sorry, I'm looking at my calendar. I guess what I just sort of asked for tonight is a general nodding of heads or thumbs up if people think a workshop towards the end of this month is viable, or should we really be thinking further out? And so I guess I'll start with, what do you think this month?
August,
September.
no, September,
No, September,
yes.
sorry. Sorry, I already jumped ahead. September.
At this point, late September might work.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
And Jay, what did you mean? Is it just efficiencies that we're talking about for the planning board?
So we have a couple of different things. I think, you know, Jamel, Angela, and I were talking the other day, and there's a few different things that we were able to just rattle off without too much thought, frankly. But one, just to put a finer point on it, again, at that workshop the other night with town council and the Downs team, there was some discussion about looking at a potential for an administrative review process for certain type of developments within the innovation district. And so really looping the planning board into that conversation and get your input on that was certainly something that I heard would be valuable in that discussion. And so, you know, knowing it's now 10:15, we can certainly talk about that in more depth at that time. But so again, you know, I know that was something at least on one or two of your minds after that meeting. I got a phone call or two, and so I think that was something that would be good for us to start talking about.
Can you, you or Jamel or someone send us the link to last week's meeting so that we can look at it?
Sure can. I'll drop myself a note right now. Yep. So yeah, I think that's what I have for staff report. And again, really, I just I already made one mention of it, but just a clear and explicit reminder of our joint hearing with town council next Wednesday to talk about the contract zone amendment for Mercedes-Benz. I believe you've received the packets. Staff will get you out a memo by the end of the week just to sort of update you on process for those who haven't been through it a couple times and just some initial staff thoughts.
Jay, is that going to be a Zoom or?
Oh, thank you, Roger. I did mean to. So that is going to be, so yeah, the other thing. So so the workshop that council held last week, and I believe actually Nick was actually in attendance, and I think some others watched, but Nick was actually in the house. It was what I call a hybrid Zoom meeting. It is still a Zoom virtual meeting. However, I believe it was at least 4 or 5 of the counselors were up in chambers, and the Downs team that was presenting was in chambers. Nick, I believe, was the only member of the public, I believe I heard, actually there. So there's certainly space limitations, obviously, given social distancing. For those who watched, there was plexiglass in between each of the counselors' seats and those sorts of things. So the meeting on September 2nd is going to be a virtual Zoom meeting, but it's going to be a hybrid where we could actually, I was talking with Tom Hall, based on the spacing, we could potentially have up to 4 of our planning board members at the meeting. And I think there's going to be a couple of the, so I'll send out an email that makes things a little bit more clear to folks, and I'm certainly happy to talk sort of offline about that. But
But let me ask you this: we don't have to be at the meeting, though. We could do it on Zoom.
you could do it just like you're doing it tonight.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yep. And it is still a virtual meeting. It's still a Zoom meeting. Really, the way I like to think about it for myself, and it may help others, is even those that are in council chambers are in a Zoom meeting. So as you're seeing me, you may see 4 or 5 or 6 people, but they are just a Zoom participant. And it really enables, because again, I think we can only have upwards of 23 or 25 people in the room at a time. And when you figure you add council members or planning board members and then staff, we're eating up half of that number before we even open the doors to anyone from the public. So it still provides that opportunity for public involvement and board members who I think I've heard there's at least 1 or 2 counselors maybe that have said, we're still in a pandemic. I don't wish to come in, and that's completely acceptable and fine because it is, a virtual meeting. So hopefully that answers that question anyway.
All right. Any more staff report?
I don't know if you want to let Rachel jump in on that or.
All right, Rachel.
And I just wanted to respond to Jay's question about timing for a workshop. I do believe we do need a workshop. There are some things that we can talk about. I mean, I'm looking at our agenda for tonight, and we only got through item 11. So there's just a there's just a a waiting list that seems to go on forever. But just a plea on the workshop. Some of you may not know, but I'm the Democratic chair in Cumberland County, and the rumor has it there's an election this year. And there is increasing, the workload is dramatically increasing. So it's, I need as much notice as possible on times so that if I need to shift something, I will try and shift it. If it could be a little later, that might work better. But once you get into GOTV, all bets and any part of your life other than that is off. So just some flexibility on the schedule of the workshop, and I appreciate that.
Administrative amendment report.
I'll do my quick staff report, then admin amendment. Does that work?
That works for me.
All right. So we had a pre-con meeting for the Next Gen Fitness Center building addition a few weeks ago. So there should be underway soon over on Pleasant Hill Road. And there's been 2 administrative amendment reviews, both in the Innovation District for slight amendments to the AV Technic site and the Dukas construction site, if you may remember that one. So That's it.
All right. And we have correspondence. No? Okay. Planning board comments. Roger.
Yes, I'd just like to say it's nice to see Angelo again.
Any other planning board comments this evening? Jennifer.
I just have a question, and I feel like maybe Jamil, you mentioned this previously, but also it would have been at 10 o'clock, so I've forgotten. Do you have any update on the Verizon project on the off of Black Point Road on the sewer sanitary district property?
Yes, I know they started construction. And last I heard, they were planning on being done by the end of September. I don't know if I'm, you could correct me, Angela, is that still on schedule?
Yep, that's my understanding.
So they're still moving forward.
So hidden back there. I don't venture down the driveway, but I was just curious. Thank you.
Any other planning board comments? No. I will make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate all the hard work you do. Have
Thanks,
a good
guys.
evening.
See you later.